Hello, welcome to the sixth day of COP, and this is our third session of It's For You, the antidote to COP28. And of course, as always, we call to you to redirect your spending to those you think are making the world better. That's
Indeed.
literally who you want to buy your tomatoes from. And tonight, we're going to have a fairly quiet session, partly because Richard, unfortunately, has got a frog in his throat. And he has been to the doctor and the vet, and the doctor has said, nah, nothing to do with me. And the vet said, you should stop trying to kiss them. They get in there. And so, Richard, what have you got to say to that?
Not much, really. We're hoping that, or some of you might pray that my voice breaks down quicker than I expect. But I will try to be fairly stumm tonight and let David do the talking. However, as usual, I wish you all a very good evening, good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world. And on the sixth day of Christmas, what was brought?
That's a very good question. I'm going to have to look it up.
Because
On
I
the
don't
sixth
know.
day.
I'm not native to these shores, so I actually don't know what the sixth day of Christmas would bring. But we will bring you pretty much our usual format. We will, in a moment or so, start off as is customary with who's tipping over the tipping point for another episode of Sustainable Laughter. And after that, we're going to play you a great conversation we had with one of the proper heavyweights in the world in the area of sustainability and its connection to financial markets in particular, Adam Wasserman. So I strongly recommend you all to stay in tune for that particular clip, which is incredibly uplifting and highlighting in how he sees the world and what needs to be done first before we can consider other things. And then,
But before that, we have a segment from an intergenerational conversation.
Indeed.
And through the conversation, it turned out that when I was at university, we were protesting to keep open the coal mines. When today the young people are protesting to shut them down. That's how different, how we have swung 180. So, but we will start with who tipped over the tipping point.
Laughing, unstuntable. Don't worry, English is not my first language. So I'm here with the very good, wonderful people here. So today we're going to play a game. Everyone's going to show products that we think should not be in this planet. And we can discuss as we go and make some jokes as well. I'm going to hand over to David because he's one of the directors of this show, and Richard, and me and Kate, which is best guest on the show.
So how about this for our next item then? What is that?
It's like explosion.
The map.
It's a map. That's a start.
Oh. I suspect that's where we're planning NEOM.
What is NEOM?
NEOM is the wonder net zero city championed by the Saudis. It's going to cost so much money. There aren't enough zeros in the world to put behind whatever number you put first. But I suspect,
and in fact, you see,
the corridor.
This is the city.
I heard a funny story about it. It's very, very long. And with most infrastructure projects, you start them nearby where all the existing infrastructure is and work that way. But for some reason, apparently they decided to start at the other end. But most infrastructure projects, a la HS2, also don't usually complete. So they're worried they're going to have this city that's like hundreds of kilometers that way, but it doesn't meet the other infrastructure. And so then they were like, well, it'll be too hot to drive or walk between, tens of kilometers without it. So then they'll just end up with a little kind of long umbrella between the end of the city and the other infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, that gives a whole new meaning to stranded assets, right?
Yes.
That really is a whole new ball game for stuff that will never ever become usable again. But
A lot of people are making a lot of money doing bird surveys for them to make sure they don't interrupt the flight paths of birds.
Is that what they're concerned about?
Yeah,
Including this. I mean, this is one of these totally ridiculous things. Anyway, so I mean, it's one of these things where you say, oh, I'm going to do a bird survey for this, and that will make it all right. When you're thinking, should you be building this at all?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think this goes back to our last thing about our idea that we can live in a sealed concrete box and be sort of happy, healthy, thriving humans, just completely and utterly divorced from nature. That city sort of, that's the thing that worries me about it more than anything, really. The idea that we sort of move, you've seen that film WALL-E, where we sort of move much closer to just being strapped into a chair and plugged into the matrix. I mean, I lived in Jakarta for quite a while, and there you get everything in the mall, and people don't really go outside. There's not pavements to walk around on, that sort of thing. But I just don't think I don't think that's the way humans were intended to live.
Oh yeah, and here's something about how it's being built. So and it's a little bit related to what you're talking about. But this is the way to, as it says on the bottom, you can read it. Avoiding the use of carbon-intensive trucks, cranes, and other heavy equipment.
Wow.
Transport helicopters is their answer. And apparently the emissions from transport helicopters don't count, so you're okay.
Yes.
Aviation is not parts, goes into a separate bucket.
I mean, the flip side is they're not chipping down any forest or anything like that to build there, are they?
That's good. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And okay, who knows what city?
Yeah, I'm really with Kate on this one, because, you know, as humans, I don't think we were really designed in our DNA to sit in big concrete structures. Because if we did, you know, prisons would be a wonderful place to exist. And my suspicion is that it's not, you know. We have kind of tried those things. They don't generally work very well. And, you know, selling condos there, I don't see many pre-subscriptions for moving into the literal middle of nowhere in a concrete bunker. I just don't see the point.
It's
I mean, they have the resources.
It's made with glass, but you just gave me an idea for a beautiful segment that, you know, if we ever get around to doing it, get around to, you know, really getting this going, which is, you know, you have to live the sustainable life for a certain period and see what it's like. So you can go into your prison and actually see what that's like, and you can go into Neom as being built. But who knows the dimensions of this city?
It's very long, it's not very wide, and it's quite tall. It's basically like a long cable or square structure that wiggles. But no, actually it's supposed to be straight as well. So it doesn't even wiggle, it just goes in one direction. So it's, but also I think we need to come back to the money here. I'm sorry, you know, the money being touted around for this project, you know, is absolutely astonishing. And you're thinking, if you are prepared to spend that amount of dosh on what effectively is new structure, how can you put that to best use for the country? And Saudi Arabia being in a very particular geographical location, they don't have perhaps all the options we have in other places. But is this really the smartest way you want to spend that amount of money? Because, you know, where I grew up, that's a lot of money they're talking about. It really is an awful lot of money.
Yeah, one of the other things that's a bit sinister about this, I've started to hear a lot about billionaires going up and buying land in New Zealand and creating a sort of off-the-grid bunker so that when the climate apocalypse happens, they can go and live there.
Yeah.
And this sort of strikes me as like, is this like hedging their bets? Like they're basically like, we are upping oil production. We know the climate is messed up. And so creating this sort of enclosed bunker with all the air con and everything like that is sort of, it is, if Saudi Arabia is going to be 50 plus degrees for most of the year, maybe that's what they have to do, and that's their climate escape. But that to me, again, that's sort of throwing up the hands and just being, we've got to build the bunkers now, is really terrifying for everyone else that can't afford to go and live there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and I don't know for the rest of you, but the name bunker doesn't really invite me to go and say, let me splash out here a few bucks for buying a place in a bunker. And I, even when it had all the aircon and the water filters and everything else, the Führer bunker under the Reichstag in April 45, it was not a happy place. So I think we've tried the bunker kind of thing to escape reality. It just doesn't work very well.
But I bet this is going to have some great cinemas and that sort of thing.
Oh, a gigantic movie room.
The most luxury bunker you have ever been in, marble everywhere. So, maybe we've not tried a marble bunker before, but I think there's more and more evidence coming out that, why we like going out in forest bathing, that's become very, in for the sort of, wealthy people with not anything else to do. But I think there's more to it than just liking the sight of a tree. We exchange microbes and all the different biodiversity with the natural environment that we go around. And I think there's so much to know about our own biodiversity and our own bodies that you just think, gosh, we might be missing a complete, a whole world that we don't understand yet as to why people in cities generally are getting more sick with these like chronic diseases and that sort of thing. And there's an idea now that might be because living in a completely unnatural and artificial environment just isn't good for us. So sorry, That's not very funny, but
No, it is.
Just something that might not be great.
No, I mean, you think of the big concrete structures we've built in the world, take away prisons. I think that's kind of given. The whole.
We can all say that they're not great.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a country where we had the Million Program. I think is the direct translation. It was basically a political decision to create 1 million new places to live in the 1950s as population growth took off. And the Million Program was very centered around Stockholm in the 50s and 60s. And we built these square concrete houses in suburbs where usually the tube line ended. And 50 years later, we can fairly safely say that these were not happy places to grow up. Nothing much good has come from there. And now scientists are making studying visits to see these environments, how they have developed over 50 years. And their verdict is awful. You need to let nature take a place however you build things. Completely pushing it into submission and just construct things because we can is never going to be a great idea. It just won't.
Okay. So this city is 170 kilometers long. At one end of it, and it's 200 meters wide.
Okay. So Usain Bolt does it in 20 seconds, the rest of us in 2 minutes or something.
Exactly. Okay. 200 meters wide, 170 kilometers. He's not going to do the 170 kilometers. Okay, no. And 500 meters tall. So it's two walls, 500 meters tall, two walls, either side of a 200-meter gap. And the two walls, 170 meters long, are office and apartments, basically, stretching 170 meters long.
No,
it's supposed to make the 15-minute city into a joke by saying everything is within 2 minutes. That's because after spending 2 minutes there, you probably don't want to live anymore. So everything is within 2 minutes in there. the middle bit, this lovely bit in the middle, which is only 200 meters wide, because you've got 500 meters either side of you, it's going to be like those bits in the movies where you see the walls coming in all the time.
Yeah.
So at one end of it is a port they're building, a marina they're building for the next generation of super yachts. You know how you park in a car park, and the car park was designed for minis, and it just doesn't fit the modern car anymore.
Yes.
So they're planning ahead, and they're planning for the next generation of super yachts, so that it's big enough for them on one side. On the other side is a resort that has been assigned to be the 2029 Asian Winter Games, location for the Asian Winter Games. That's what it will look like. All the snow will basically be artificial. It's going to be one massive outdoor refrigerator. And it's going to be the most sustainable ski resort, apparently, that you can ever go to.
Oh, gosh. We need to do a whole new one on this ski resort now.
So that's the other side. It's called Trojana.
Yes.
And you can buy...
because there was a big expose on Channel 4 a couple of nights ago, wasn't there? Saying basically there's a whole plan of the petrostates of how can we get people to use more oil and super yachts and an outdoor ski resort in a 50-degree country. It's such a like, maybe this isn't quite such a secret plan that they've got.
And to make it happen, it will cost $500 billion. Richard talking about the money, $500 billion. So every time you fill your car up at the moment, or every time you go along and you buy anything that's got a bit of plastic or whatever with it, or you get some clothing with polyester and all of those things, you can be sure your money has gone to a good use. It's going to build this.
Wow.
That's crazy. Wow.
And just so you all know, none of us are rich enough to be allowed to go there.
Just in case you were going to hedge our bets. Well, if I could have a free tour, it would be quite good.
The two long sections, running parallel, it really is, parallel universe. And Pink Floyd would have loved to have shot their video in there. That would have been sensational shoot. I just I cannot see the attraction. I keep going back to that. It's like, where is the attraction to move into a concrete compound? It really doesn't mix with me and what I want to do with my life.
No, the
super yachts and the ski resort and everything else. It's still going to be a concrete compound. Can't you?
No, it's going to be absolutely amazing. It's going to be it's going to be the thing is attracting all the architects and everybody to try and build the best thing they can about it. Literally. Yeah.
I'm sure you can do fancy stuff, but at the end of the day, it's still a concrete compound, right? And $500 billion, okay, whatever is the latest they're using as a number. If HS2 is anything to go by, and let's give the Saudis leeway, but I'm sure they do this better than the British do, okay? It's still going to end up costing like 2 trillion, not 500 billion. Because HS2 on the same metric would have ended up costing like 5 trillion. So say they're twice as good, so they can cut it in half of HS2. It's $2.5 trillion by the time it's done. That's an awful lot of money, awful lot of money.
Well, this is going to go to saving all the birds, and the money will go to counting all of those up. And
okay.
Now you've said it's 500 meters high. I'm thinking some of those little birds are not getting over that, are they? There's going to be a lot of...
not getting over.
Not the little ones. No.
Higher than they can in their path.
No, but this is one of the silly things about a lot of the surveys that are done at the moment to prove that yes, it's a bad idea for this or that nature,
Yeah.
but they still all they need to do is sort of do the data collection and prove it.
I love the retrofit engineering. Just do the data collection and then we can prove it. It's not like
maybe they could build little holes or tunnels for birds to creep through.
I mean,
can I represent Bushman people, please? Because when you asked me what was that earlier on, you know, the first photo, I was thinking, we don't know nothing until you dig next to my land. You know, when it start like, you know, like the Bushman doesn't know nothing until he start digging next to his feet. He's like, oh, what's going on here? He already like did. So my job today on this show, guys, I'm representing the Bushman, and I just want to add what Ketchy said about rich people going to the forest a lot. They're up to something. Believe me, my friend. They're going to price. We need to stop them doing that, because any rich person going to the forest is up to something. They don't like forest. They only like going there because they want to make business. You know what I mean? That I'm just guessing, okay? Because I can see like it costs everything nowadays to go to a retreat, for example. To the forest supposed to be free, compared to Zimbabwe. If I feel like I want to go to the jungle in Zimbabwe, I don't have to ask anyone permission to say, oh, I want to go to the forest. But yes, I have to watch out the lions and stuff, you know, because they own the place. I think I'm making this as a joke, so don't take this personal. It's just like give you a little bit of imagination, okay? Because I said earlier on, I'm not an expert for anything, but I'm an expert of imagination and make people laugh, and as well as, yeah, you know, sustainable laugh. So yeah, the points are coming up because the time is moving. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. That was great.
And just let me throw this up there. This is the Crystal Tower that the architect firm Zaha Hadid is designing for the ski resort. So that you have this ice tower, so that I think it might literally be made with ice, so that you can.
No, it can't be. You're a physicist, man. That cannot be right. They've just watched Frozen and gone, okay.
That's exactly it. They watch Frozen. You're absolutely right. That's what's happening.
Elsa's tower.
You know, that great architect working there, the daughter came along or the son came along and says, I know how to draw this. I've seen Frozen.
So you build a ice tower in the middle of the desert, one of the hottest places in the world. It's a really, really long roundabout way to have a vodka luge by the end of the day. You know, it's like, if you're that keen on it, really.
It's the après ski. Okay, let's get the point.
Because, you know, we've all been there, right? You need that to get the après ski going, but long way to go fixing that.
Okay, do we need it?
It's going to be a non-alcoholic vodka luge, which doesn't quite have the same effect.
Does the world need this in order to have a vodka luge?
No.
Well, you see, not being much of a skier, but actually quite fond of the rest of the time in the resort.
There is something about, you know, if there are lots of people that really like to be really unsustainable, they like super yachts, they like skiing in the desert, maybe it's best if they're all in the same place.
Send them to swing.
Now we're thinking. Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to build this. You can just send them to Saudi Arabia without building this.
But the problem, they'll be coming and steal your resources to build themselves more and more. So they actually emptying you. It's not, they don't just do it.
What did Richard say about the prison? We could do that too.
Yeah, you know, I keep going back to bunkers and concrete structures and stuff.
Okay.
I mean, some of the technology around it, I'm sure, is amazing. But, you know, at the end of the day, don't you just pinch yourself on the arm, and say, with all the money in the world, is this how I want to spend it? Is this good use?
Yeah, but it's your money they're spending. It's okay. It's your money they're spending. They're not spending theirs. The public investment fund, the Saudi sort of investment fund, it's not really putting up money for this. It's your money that they're doing. So every time you fill your car up, you're building another meter.
Yeah. I get all that. But, at the end of the day, the money goes there and it's their decision to employ it in this fashion. And I'm just thinking, you could do an awful lot of really cool things, the eye sculpture apart. I'm talking really cool things with like $2.5 trillion. I can think of lots of things. But I keep going back to the money, It's for what essentially is a vanity project. I think the price tag is really, really high. I have to say that. So,
okay.
despite Vodka Luch is a no for me, but it has features I can kind of see. Yeah, let's go.
Nico.
I just want to add what Richard said when you talk about money. I'm thinking, I'm from Zimbabwe, right? 100 pounds, about 220 million. So we can actually build that town within a week.
Yeah.
We can do it within a week very cheaply. Because if you make my currency so poor to the point that £1 become trillion, so I might as well go and help these guys.
Yeah.
So listen, we have all the money made it for us. Where we go, let's do it. But I think there's something there about making the poor, the rich. Because if to buy a bread for 200,000, that's a joke. Which country does that?
Yeah.
In Zimbabwe, yes. I might not be correct exactly the price, but the currency is really very, very, very horrible. Like to the point that when you talk about trillion, we already had it. Every child's got a trillion in Zimbabwe walking around. But when you change that trillion, it's like 10 pounds, maybe 20 pounds. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to weigh these things out. Like why is like that? Anyway, I'm gonna leave that for the next session. Just to remind the audience, we are not doing politics here. We're doing one of the best shows for COP28 and sharing knowledge and what we think we should keep in the planet or what we should not. So are you guys done well? So the points are ready. Are you ready for that?
Yes, we're ready.
We're always ready, Judge.
Yes. Now things has changed a bit because this was the most heating conversation for the session today. It was really so much things come up. So I'm gonna give Richard 40 on this time.
Whoa! He's steaming away.
Give Kirk 30 and David is always is part of the host. So I'm kind of like be generous. So I'm giving David 35.
Oh, really?
Wow.
No, because it's between hosting as well as directing. So kind of like.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I can live with that.
Thunder is coming.
It's the beginning, but we need regulation because we can't stop ourselves from over-exploiting. We've tried, we've had sustainability and CSR and all these things. Fundamentally, we just need some rules of the game for capitalism that says you can't fish more than that, you can't chop more than that, you can't, and then the world would be a really nice place, but
you're about to get Richard going. I think he's libertarian.
No, but it should come naturally.
You can see the horns growing up.
Well, there we go. Just as we reaching to the end, when our sound recording seemed to have gone a little out of sync too. Yeah, a little bit like your vocal cords today.
Yeah, a little bit like Neom is out of sync with reality, perhaps. Maybe there was something to take away from all that, but there we go. I thought it was quite an intriguing debate about money as well. The numbers being touted around are just absolutely staggering, however you look at it. But there you go.
You think they're not going to stay on budget? 500 billion, you think it's going to be 2.5 trillion? You think this is not?
You tell me one big infrastructure project that has ever come in on budget.
Yes.
There we go. Okay. Of course they're going to be on time and cheaper than the can.
Well, they have to be on time. I mean, the Progena thing, 2029, Asian Winter.
There's Santonis
Games.
reindeer as well coming past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Christmas time,
Christmas
It's
time.
By the way, on the 6th day, it's 6 geese are laying. You know the golden geese?
Golden geese.
That's who they are. Yep. So today is day of golden geese. Today is the day for the line and for the special projects along there. And for the next part, I think what we're going to do is to listen to some intergenerational conversation. I hope you'll find it interesting. It's basically a bunch of 20-somethings talking to me about how they see the world, and with me egging them on occasionally. Would like to know what you think about it afterwards, Richard.
Yeah, I promise I will deliver my verdict.
Advise new parents.
I think stop using new things. Get things secondhand. Go on Facebook Marketplace. Just also, especially newborn parents, think how many brand new baby grows they buy and which they would grow out of in a month.
Would you tell them don't worry, or would you tell them worry?
I think you tell them don't worry and just strip it back.
Be mindful of it.
Strip it back.
Strip it back, yeah. As in, I don't know. I mean, you get books that are like 1,000 pages long about the 20 different ways you could raise your kids, and how, as a 1-year-old, they can tell you when they need a nap or need this and that, and talk to you. And I think it's that's just too much extra layers, too much faff. And I think if you're advising a new parent, you just say don't worry, because I mean we're resilient. Humans are resilient as nature. So yeah, so strip it back. Forget all the. I mean, it's like the that's a good example. I don't know. It's like do you remember when Lena used to fall out her cot? And like, I can imagine nowadays you'd probably buy a cot and put it in your bed, and then your solution was we'll just use the string that we have, and it worked better than anything, to be fair, because it meant she could pull it down and get out when she needed to go to the loo, and pull it up when she was sleeping. It was like, yeah. So I think that's what I suggest to a new parent. Or don't wait. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's about. I think kids growing up now, or being a young adult growing up now, everything is very complicated. Like there are so many issues to care about, so many successes to want. There needs to be so much drive. There's, you have the life that you have with your friends versus perhaps your professional life, your social media life, and there's lots of layers. I think there is an element of trying to take it back to the simplicity of core values. So I suppose that's your kind of dignity and your mindfulness or kindness. And I think core values in most instances are shared in a community, but with slight variation within a family. And so I think it's about finding out what's important to you. And by and large, if you value the same things, and I think if you bring your child up wanting the best for them, I think as telling it the one thing with older generations, sometimes you feel like it's not simpler. I don't think it was simpler 50 years ago. I think the stresses are just different, and so it's very difficult for different generations to necessarily fully empathize with what it is like. You can remember being, so I'm 26. You can remember being 26, but you probably can't really empathize with being 26 in a post-pandemic world where we've got conflict in every corner of it, with climate change going, well, the planet will burn by the time you're 50, and the financial market is unsettled and all these things. So, but then equally, I probably couldn't relate to being 25 and not being able to, just text my friends with ease and get social support that way. But I think it's very easy to get caught up in all these things of what someone does or doesn't have. But actually, if you boiled it down, you being 26 probably still had the same insecurities of, I don't know what I'm going to do with my career. I don't know if I want to settle. I don't know what a family might look for me, or if I want a family, or I don't know, you know, all the like questions remain the same. It's just the context they're in. And I think we get really focused on the context that we kind of forget the question and the intention. So I guess that's try and bring it back to that a bit.
Do things like education and ambition matter?
Education, what, sorry?
Yeah.
And ambition.
I think it's
absolutely ambition.
I think,
more.
yeah.
I think education matters. I think ambition can sometimes feel a little, not necessarily as a privilege, but in order to feel ambitious about your life, I think you have to feel secure in what you already have. Otherwise, you're just grappling for survival, if that makes sense. Rather,
I think the other side of it is
like you're wants beyond your basic needs, so you can't really want in the same way that someone else can want if those aren't met. But education, I think, is important because it's something that everyone should have equal access to. So that's almost like a basic need. Meanwhile, ambition, I'm like, yes, would be great for everyone to have, but there are things.
Does ambition come from education as well, though?
I suppose partly, if you know, you can't want something if you don't know that there's something to want, right?
Yeah.
Like, how
but education can be more about morals and educating on yourself as well. So, yeah, I think to add on to what you said before is, I think the same insecurities are about as what we have compared to someone 50 years ago in our shoes. I feel like the only difference is it feels like you can have everything within your fingertips. You can go to Australia, or you can change your career, or you can have 70 different avenues of one field, like history. You can go down there's so many different postgrad courses, whereas before there's 3 options. So it opens the world up more, but it almost opens the world up more to more insecurities too. It's just the banana thing, isn't it? You have this option to do it, and it's almost like, why shouldn't I do it? But then it also takes away from the fact that it's not what you need, and it's
makes stuff more complex.
I'll just show the banana thing.
Yes. Sorry, I've got a really early job interview.
Yes, thank you. Unless you want to watch the banana thing again, or just
I'll watch a little bit of it again to sneak off.
And welcome to Who's Tipping Over the Tipping Point. This is a comedy quiz show. Believe it or not, it's a banana slicer.
Wow.
So the whole idea is that you first, I gathered it by reading at the product sort of instruction.
Before you go, do you need it?
No. Definitely not.
No.
No. I don't think so.
Not even as a
I mean, I think the novelty stocking filler maybe, but the 2 minutes of novelty is probably not worth the 50 years plus of plastic. From it.
No, so. It will last forever. You know, it will last forever, right? It's one of these forever plans.
Instead, make them a lifetime voucher to cut up their banana for them.
Yeah.
But isn't that the same as that whole like, oh, you have to have your education from the most prestigious place? Do you need it, or is it just the same as what you learn anywhere else?
That's actually very good comparison, right?
Yeah.
You know, do you need that? So here's an idea.
Still eat the banana at the end.
You can go to a media school, right? And they can be really expensive. You know, kind of like media training school, whatever it is. Or you can go and do what we've done, which is basically get onto StreamYard and do things like that, and figure it out. Do you need the £100,000 a year school?
Well, I guess it comes to. I mean, I think the answer is probably, but I guess it comes down to the context, right? Because you can imagine someone who's really stressed, who thinks they need.
Well, yes. Why wouldn't you want it? Why wouldn't you think
someone who's done it differently? So I think that's why conversation is so important to it, because it's the shared experience. Like, you always think. I think medical school is a good example. You think you go to medical at 18, then you qualify, you do your foundation year 1 and year 2, and historically, up until the last 5-10 years, you go straight into training. And it's only really in the last few years that people start taking F3s, F4s, so time away before going to training. And it's through conversations with other colleagues that I've been like, wow, there's a whole host of, like, I don't just have to work in a hospital somewhere else, or I don't have to go abroad, like I could do research, but you don't know that unless you have the conversation. So I probably would have been like, okay, I'll spend X amount of money to do X amount of things to build my portfolio to make sure I get a training job this year. Because that's what we think.
Right. And then you realize when you have conversations.
So that you have I guess the world is not necessarily binary, and it's not necessarily one directional, that things exist.
I feel like why wouldn't, as a person innately, like, why wouldn't you want, if I said to you, you could have this Coca-Cola bottle that is hand manufactured, or you could just have this water bottle I found in a ditch, but the Coca-Cola bottle costs 70k. You're like, oh, I might not be able to afford it, but I still want it. But then you look back on it, and at the end of it just made you hydrated. So I think a lot of it is...
The thing with the bottle you find in a ditch is most people would not think of washing it. So they reject it.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, it's a step that, which is interesting,
Which is really sort of...
But I guess that comes down to use case, right? Because actually, like, we would, like, I'll put my hand up, I would never really link, oh my gosh, there's a bottle in the London street, let me pick it up, reuse it. But I'm sure there are communities where things like those commodities are actually luxuries, and actually it's very normal for them to reuse and recycle in a way that we're not used to because it's so easy to consume. And actually, is it through shared conversation and sharing experiences with them that we realize, actually, it might be okay, because I guess the, like, fear is it's dirty, I'm going to get this mess. And actually, these people have been doing it for 10, 15 years, and they're fine because they do this and this. And okay, they don't take the bottle that's come from the farmyard truck where they've gotten rid of all the animal waste, but maybe the one in the dry grass with, sterilized appropriately. You know, right? So I guess you could still get something from those. I don't know.
I mean, even you saying it then, it's like, I don't think of it, but as soon as you say it, it makes sense. It's like, why wouldn't you just wash it or use it to water a plant or something? There
you go.
But then someone nowadays would say, what about the microplastics that come from sitting your plastic bottle in the sun and then just fall down there?
Well, you breathed all those in already anyway. I mean, that's...
Sometimes I think the sentence there is pick your battles.
Pick your battles.
They're all important, but you can't care about everything all the time.
So those are probably one of those conversations that come up when you said before, where you just hear it and you just can't take an argument on either side. So you're saying,
one of the aspects about asking the question, what do you really want, right, is it's also forcing you into commitment. It's quite scary to genuinely ask, even before you tell someone else, what do you really want? It's much easier to say, what do you think the person wants from you? And then can I do that? And we're almost trained to do that because that's what getting a job is all about, right?
Yeah.
But the question, what do you really want? I mean, how do you think,
I think it is easy to be more neutral. But then again, what comes to light from that is, if you're not saying anything, then if you're not building or if you're not helping in some small way, then you're actually doing the opposite. I find that tends to be the case now. It's like, if you just sit in the middle, then you may as well be doing more harm.
Yeah, I think there's a big emphasis, certainly in our generation. If you're not actively doing something, you're like a passive observer, but that's just facilitating, right?
So you're saying it's very judgmental?
Well, it's not judgmental. I think there's just been a real shift of, starting to you can't do anything. I think maybe it's swung too far to you can do everything and you can change the world. And what I mean by pick my battles is, I may care about climate change, but feasibility in my life of what I can do, I can make sure there's a plastic bag in or like a reusable bag or whatever in my backpack when I go to work. I try to use but like, I'm not necessarily everyone will have different small changes in their life that is feasible to their life. And so that's what I meant when I say like pick your battles. You don't have to overnight become the superwoman who reuses everything and is like zero waste and all of that, because that's actually quite difficult to do. But you can still care about an issue. I think there's a difficulty in that there will be judgment, similarly to parenting, where people think that you are caring about a certain issue in the right or wrong way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It is very judgmental.
It can be.
Yeah. I think it's also if you're not, yeah, it's almost like if you're.
Depends who you with, right?
Yeah.
But it can be very, I mean, you know, you would say like certain climate change protesters would say that this is a very passive way of engaging in the difficulties we face the world. Meanwhile, someone else might say, well, you know, these are conversations that need to be had, and there's something about building a community and actually going out there and frustrating people in day-to-day life, and the press that comes with it is actually putting people on the other side or making people defensive or nervous about associating with this issue. And so you can see it whatever way you want. I think you have to accept that some people will judge what you do as right or wrong on the actions you take, but the only thing you're responsible for is really how you judge others and
For yourself.
Yeah.
Very subjective. On that.
Pick your battles. What is your battle?
Yeah.
I think for me it's a little bit what I'm exposed to, so I guess that's education. Things my friends might educate me on, or things I read about. That's what I'll pick up on. And I guess you choose, you know, everyone has natural preferences, so I kind of lean into that gut instinct a bit. But it's a bit like, I guess, the thing I think of it is you've got a core issue. Let's say, for me, the analogy would be my patient. And we have a multidisciplinary team, and everyone looks at it slightly different. But the core value of the shared team is that, you know, the patient's best interest, we want to be compassionate, we want to be safe. You've got climate change and everyone has a different take on it, but the core principles, I think, if you boil it down, are fairly consistent. And I think I tried to take it to those principles.
And what would that be?
I think there is an element of urgency. I think it's a bit, it's false to say that there isn't. You know, I don't think we're sitting on a situation that can wait for 10, 15, probably not even a year, to be honest. So there's a sense of urgency, which for me, I think means thinking about day-to-day life a little bit more. I think there is an element of...
That's in when you say thinking about day-to-day life, do you mean thinking about how you cope with day-to-day life, or thinking about how you change day-to-day life?
I think how you change, because I think, you know, if you think about something that you've almost missed the deadline for, which that's probably a good analogy, then you're like, okay, well, I need to do something now. But I think that's whether you need to be kind to yourself, to be like, okay, I don't need to become, you know, I don't need to be perfect in this. I just need to make small changes that are consistent. And then for me, I think sustainability is a really big theme across everything. Because, you know, you have like sustainability within biodiversity, so allowing natural places to flourish in the way that they would, so leaving things undisturbed. And that might even be just caring for your local environment. Like if you see there's a bottle in the middle of a bush or park, picking that up. Then sustainability in terms of, I think, as a community, so building those connections with my own friends, making sure that they're okay, thinking what they might need that I could provide, and knowing that they'll pick up for me when I need it. Financially, I think, you know, you come to a point where you start investing and thinking, really trying to think about...
Or spending.
And spending, it's both, and it's thinking a little bit about, I think the question your colleague was saying about like what you want is important, because what do you want and what do you need? And then balancing that and thinking, actually, for example, I think everyone thinks it would be really nice to have £1 million overnight, but that's probably over what I need as an individual. It's probably inappropriate for what I need as an individual. What it's really giving me is security, and then thinking about ways, how do I as an individual sustain like a sustainable sense of security? That doesn't mean I'm unnecessarily taking from resources just to give me that full sense.
Well, what was your original question? What are our battles? I think I took that a bit more literally in terms of like, what do we... I think I took that a bit more.
reasons?
No, I mean,
Or no,
it is kind of literal. So you know, what better?
I mean, the things that came to mind when you said that was the small things, like Ina said, is, you know, bring your own bag to the shops, or don't throw away the 2 potatoes that you have because you can turn it into an omelette of some sort, type of thing, or walk when you can rather than take the bus, even if it's the rain, because realistically you dry in half an hour anyway, right? Or well, not bus, but yeah, stuff like that. I don't know. I think I just thought of it more as, what do I do in a day to reduce waste a bit and live a bit simpler? But then there's lots of things that I could do better of, probably too.
Do you think you have that power to change things in a significant way? Do you think your actions matter in that sense, or do you think that the choices you have now, you have a greater burden on you through the things that you're talking about than when I was growing up? You know, it was mine was I walked because, you know, the buses cost money. I didn't throw as much away because there wasn't as much to throw away.
I guess it's different. I think it's your point. Now we're so interconnected, and I guess the biggest difference is, I don't want to sound rude and call you old, but this issue is very much about our future as mature adults, and potentially the families we have, or the friends that we have, and the families that they have, in a way that is very different to, I think, potentially someone of your generation thinking about the future you have. I'm sure there's lots of concerns about, you know, the futures of your sons and daughters, nieces and nephews, and what the world will look like for them. But I think that's a slightly different fear or anxiety that comes with thinking about it being your future. And so in that sense, I do think there's a little bit more burden on choices you make. Sometimes I think it's a bit philosophical about whether the choices we make really make an impact, because yes, fundamentally, I think if lots of individuals made small changes, you could see that, like you get a pattern and that influences you. And you can either sit on the fence of, well, that gives me power, that definitely gives me power, I'm going to do it. Or you can sit on the fence being like, well, what's the point of me doing it if the other 3 million people don't do it? So I tend not
8 billion.
I try not to get too, because I think I've been there with other issues, but I think it actually doesn't really matter what other people do. And I don't know that you need to focus so much on the big change it makes. I think you need to feel like you as an individual can make change, and you can make choices about your own life. And I will make choices that I feel are right or wrong based on kind of the things that matter to me.
So
and in that I have power, and in that I have control. But that I guess that I'm trying to say, like, the power and the control doesn't lie in the outcome, it lies in the decision you make at the time. Like, not just in the outcome.
So when you say can make change, that's this, I can make change about myself.
Yeah, and you might therefore influence the environment and do all that. But if you get all caught up in the chain reaction of what will happen, you get so caught up in the probability of will it or won't it happen? How do I get there? Will it be a big enough impact? Will it matter? That you don't make any change.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But if you go like, well, actually the change...
And then you know it won't happen.
And then you know it won't happen. Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, if I say, well, it's not really about the outcome. I know the outcome I want. I know the outcome I desire. I know the outcome I would like to work towards. But even if none of that happened, there's something still quite empowering about knowing that's the right choice to make for yourself. And to know that in 50 years, God forbid if the rainforests have burned and we're drowning in acid rain or God knows what, to know that I did what I could.
Yeah.
It's quite powerful.
Yeah.
So that I think that talks to why Richard and I end up with saying is rethinking choices.
Yeah.
Would you not say you have, like, when you were our age, you had the same, or there was the same consensus around climate change and stuff though? I feel like a lot of the same issues, like you said before, like I feel like a lot of the same.
When I was growing up in the UK, racism is probably more of an issue.
Yeah, but that still is an issue, isn't it?
If I'm walking down the road, there's a group of people coming down, I cross over the other side.
Yeah.
So that was my issue. I do remember very vividly in one of my first days at university, I was in this mathematics library. It's not just mathematics; it's the sort of school of mathematics, whatever. And there was a guy there, and for some reason, I ended up in a conversation with him, and he was talking about CFCs, and he was a researcher. And I didn't know anything about that, but he was basically one of the people working on how do you close the ozone hole. And I only realized that 10 years later about what he was doing.
Yeah.
So even though the awareness was there, it wasn't
The
general knowledge.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, fair enough.
Okay, I'm gonna have to
I
go.
was just say you still get people who would argue that none of it matters or none of it exists in that sense. But I guess there's less people who have, like, maybe, yeah. Would you say if you went to 10 or 20 people in the street and said, do you know what climate change is? Would you say more people would say yes now than when you were at uni then?
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure that nobody would understand what it is.
Okay.
You know, the students, this was during the time of Margaret Thatcher, the liberal students, the left-wing students, socially aware students, they were the ones going outside collecting money for miners.
Okay.
Today, they would be going outside collecting money to shut the mines. In fact, they are. You know, they're demonstrating to shut the mines. You know, kind of that's what you see. But in those days, they were there demonstrating to keep the mines open. These are the coal mines.
Yeah.
So it's definitely very, very different. And the environmental issues was more about animals becoming extinct. There was definitely that.
Yeah.
Degree of fishing. No talk of rainforest being an issue. Acid rain. Acid rain.
Maybe, I don't know, something I thought recently, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe, I mean, sounds a bit different, obviously. I don't know, I feel like there are a few topics that will always be talked about. And one of them being climate change, one of them being racism. Like, I'm sure quality of life has definitely improved in many, many, many ways, but it's still a big topic and there's still challenges around it. like maybe, yeah, there was more focus on animal extinction and now there's more focus on planet, you know, being destroyed. But it's still, you can focus on the whole chain reaction and then you can start to lose hope in it. But I think you asked, do we feel like we have an influence? And it's, I think yes, to the people around you. I think if you have good friends and good relationships and good family, then you feel like you influence them. Whether that be good or bad, you feel like you influence them. And I think it's the same thing since working. It's like, if I go in with a good attitude, or the big feeling is, no, I don't think if I do one thing, no, the whole planet won't do the same thing. I can't change everyone's behaviors. But if I go into work with a good attitude, then the people who I work with and I collaborate with will potentially go on to do their next task with a better attitude. And then actually, when you look at it as a whole, you are having an influence on the whole work environment. But also when you look at it big picture, it's like, what's the point of me coming in with a smile when this person's just here to clock in and clock out? So it's I don't know. I think it's all a bit circumstantial, but it seems to me as well from this conversation and what I think a lot generally is just everything's over thought a lot, I guess.
Yeah, overthinking is a problem.
I think that a lot of that is the media as well as social media stuff. Like, I definitely hated the fact that we didn't have iPhones when we were in year 6 and 7 and 8. Like, I think being Leonie's age now, all I wanted probably was an iPhone. But at the same time, I look back on it now and I'm like, thank God we didn't do any of that, because it just, it sucks you into a different world. And then what I said before about the options is, in fact, social media always feels like there's another option or there's something else to compare to, or there's always something more. So there's always a better banana peeler or there's always a better banana crusher out there. So it's like,
yes,
why don't I want to chase that? And then you get that ingrained cycle of, oh, you forget that you could just wash the water bottle. You forget that you can just strip it back and do this and that. Yeah, so I think it's.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, I think a lot of these things are that sort of conversation. I think this is exactly what we hope. So I'm going to edit this up, and kind of bring that along and use that along the way, because there is the internal and the external. There's the aspect of the fact that the choice is yours or whether the choice is not yours. And if you measure the choice by the outcome in the way of what is impacting the whole world, then the choice is not yours.
Yeah.
Because then you're into the part of saying, well, I got to make everyone else do the same.
Yeah. Or it's like I failed unless everyone does the same.
And then you're down into a situation of, in that case, you start going down the cycle of saying, well, in that case, then I won't do it at all.
Yeah.
What's the point? And so the choice can never be yours in that case. But if choice is yours, then you're doing it for, back to that question, what is it that you really want for that?
Yeah.
What you want doesn't mean you necessarily get. But this is the part where you say, what do I really want, rather than just...
Yeah, and is it worth it regardless of maybe not getting the whole award?
Well, maybe the simplest way of answering what I really want is, if I got it, would I no longer want it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really just the point. Yeah.
It's like the banana peeler. If I got it, I definitely would no longer want it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Banana.
Yeah, I mean, I think, your point about how it's all ingrained in a lot more things than we think. Like, whenever you ask these questions, I instantly think of, recycling examples or bring my own plastic bag and stuff. But it is a lot more. I mean, that's been the whole theme as well through your streams and stuff, isn't it? It's throughout everything we do, and it is, I guess, partly just philosophical and ethical questions. It's that's a good question of, would you want it? If you had it, would you still want it?
But honestly, thinking back, it just wasn't part of the language of when I was growing up. And students were demonstrating to keep coal mines open.
Yeah.
Rather than shutting them.
But was that because there was a lack of education around? Oh no, yeah. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? I guess. Yeah.
Well, because I mean, the talk had already begun amongst the governments.
Yeah, it had already been made aware that it was.
That there was an issue along that needed to be faced.
To be fixed, yeah.
But I think the problem was, we don't want to inconvenience the population.
Yeah. Or yeah. Was it not also though a fight? I guess it's a mixed one, because it's interesting to hear that, because it's almost like some of the things we get taught or we see and learn is, the fights for keeping coal mine open was for financial security at the end of the day, wasn't it? It's because a lot of people lost their jobs and they lost a lot of money. Yeah. So it's interesting there, because the point is that people banded together for the sake of each other, but in the expense of the planet. And now it's almost like people are not sticking together, but still at the expense of the planet a little bit. But
so that's sort of like the planet always suffers.
Yeah. But I think more people are aware. I think that example, if you went to 20 people in the street, everyone would understand the impact that things have, and everyone would be quite educated on it. But yeah, one thing you just remind me there of, it's like in the good place. It's like, if you knew you were in hell to begin with, would you even try to be a better person? So by focusing on that end result, it's like by focusing on, if everyone hasn't changed with me, then it's a failure. You're almost like, what's the point in trying to be the better person? Yeah, I think that's
maybe it was easier for us to express that when we were younger, because there weren't the external sort of issues of the climate and the extinctions of the, and I mean, you hear about extinctions of animals.
Well, do you think there was less? It's like the COVID. If you don't test it, it's not there. It's almost like extinction or climate change was still happening, I guess, but there wasn't. You didn't have your phone to look at every minute and see 3 posts out of 10 about how the world was burning.
A lot of snow. They have.
You maybe hear about it in a bit of a delayed reaction, almost, right?
Yeah.
Rather than now, you hear about it almost instantly, and then it all compiles. You've got 10 major natural disasters that happen at once, and it's or do you think that's part of it? As in there was just less. I mean, there was still newspapers and radios and TV and stuff, but there wasn't Instagram or Twitter to look at or to have pop up on your phone all the time. Do you think that played a bit of a role into it?
All the way along.
I guess it's the things that have been consistent throughout. The things that are truly a necessity. I mean, I don't know. I guess you could argue in other ways because things like milk and eggs have gone up. I was going to say maybe the things that, like how we were saying before, when you just strip back to what you need, the things that are truly a necessity are probably the things that have maybe had less increase in price, so to say. But then I think about examples, and that's not exactly the case. But it's random things of like the banana splitter and like the fancy steamer or whatever that are marketed now.
There were fewer of those.
Yeah,
there were fewer.
It's a weird thing. Social media, especially growing up with it, also seeing people who are a few years older than me, a few years below me, and it's like it has so many benefits. And it was definitely, I mean, Facebook, like the first big kind of social media platform, was intended to link people, right? The whole intention of social media initially was to bring people together. And the same with Instagram, like, oh, you find a funny video. It's like what Mum does with sending stuff into the group chat. It's, oh, here's a funny video of a cat. Let's all laugh about it and share and find something joyous from it. But then now it's almost, it's that, I guess, external a bit too. It's now a dividing factor where it's, I just want to be with my Instagram and that's it. Or I just want to be with, it's almost separated now.
So here we are back.
What do you think of that?
Well, it was, first of all, very interesting to hear their viewpoints about all these things that we discuss, because obviously they come from a different generation and they're going to see it through a very different lens than we do, because they have more of their life ahead of them than we do, than they have behind them. And also, I was struck by your daughter of how pragmatic she is. Very rational. Must be the scientist element coming from your side, But she's extremely pragmatic in her views. I certainly wasn't at that age.
I think that's the thing about young people. That they are actually quite pragmatic about it. I mean, I think there's a very big difference between their voices and the voices we've heard from people in Pakistan and India, right? And the ones we've heard from Pakistan and India, okay, there's a certain selection bias because those are people who have projects about looking after common home and doing that.
Yeah.
Here, these are people who go to university, get jobs, and do those things, and reflecting on what they think. And both end up in this part where that personal choice, the rethinking choice, the rethinking of choices, rethinking choices.
Your choice and your decisions and the way you use those matters. It will always matter because it's the cornerstone of how our economic system evolves. Yeah.
This thing again, right?
We keep going back to that, funnily enough, because actually it's all in there. Because you want to find out how that works, you read it, and then you understand it.
The unsustainable truth.
Yeah.
But it is this thing where you break through the economic choices that tells us to do one thing, and they lead us because those economic choices rely on everybody basically doing the same thing, right? Into feeling you're one against the entire tide of humanity on the other side. Who has decided? I mean, we put a poll out. You know, if you produce 1 gigawatt of renewable energy, how much of the dirty oil, gas, and coal energy should you take off because you've now provided fresh, clean energy? And we have 3 choices: 100%. In other words, for every gigawatt you produce, you take off a gigawatt, and 50%, which means that you still add more energy out. You take off half of it for every one that you put out. It's not bad. 0, which is basically to say, you just keep it the same. Keep the other one the same, and you don't really do anything with it. But you just keep putting it out, and eventually you hope it replaces it. And the final choice is you increase both, which is that for every gigawatt you put out, you actually increase the oil, gas, and coal. And the answer came out as people saying basically they think we should do both. Right?
Yeah. Good luck with global warming.
Because it's saying we need to make the planet worse. I mean, what it's basically saying is here you have people who think we need to heal the planet and heal ourselves. And it's been poisoned by the oil and gas and coal that we've been burning. And the poll says, instead of saying, well, if you want to heal yourself when you've been poisoned, you've got to stop taking the poison. It says, take more poison.
Yeah.
And that's very much the world. And that's very much reflected in their part when they keep talking about, well, the dilemma is, or the essence of their choice is, why do I do it when I know everyone else is going to do the opposite?
Because your choice still matters.
Right. And that's the commonality between what they say and what others say. And yet, in a poll, you get them coming up and saying, you got to increase both. You got to keep poisoning yourself while you try and heal yourself.
Yeah. We shall, however, dissect that particular argument more in full tomorrow night when my voice is ready to take on David face to face. But there are some paradoxes at play here, and I cannot fully explain them. But I will try to actually sleep on it and come up with a rational explanation for why that is the case.
I'll give you one last thought, just something you don't have to respond to, but I'll give you one last thought. So I went in on this meeting organized by We Don't Have Time, and there were a lot of young people there, and I talked about the situation of what happens if for every unit of renewable energy we produce, we actually take off some fraction of a unit of oil and gas and coal. And the response was, that sounds really complicated. Their response was, that's too complicated. We should just produce renewable energy and forget about the oil, gas, and coal. And that was very strongly their response. And it
where
feels
did
like
these young people come from?
Around the world, but it feels very much that from their response was, if you forget about the oil and gas and coal, then they will go away.
Yeah, I think the ostrich has tried that and it doesn't work. He still gets eaten.
I don't know, maybe.
It's.
But anyway, it's something to think about, right? Because that is the communications challenge you and I face. Right. How do we communicate an approach that says, when Taylor Swift concert tickets, when you go and buy a Taylor Swift concert ticket, you will actually be using part of that money will actually be used to keep oil and gas and coal actually from being extracted.
Yeah.
And well, as opposed to just simply say we'll get more renewable energy, which we will anyway.
Oh, for sure. That I have no doubt about. It's the other part I worry about. I'm not worried about the renewable part.
Yeah.
Not
okay. Well, anyway, let's move on. Let's move on to Finpublica. to Adam Wasserman, a gentleman with an incredibly illustrious career, corporate lawyer, securities, the head of enforcement for the SEC, and who, well, he would explain how he came about to move aside from there, to helping people recognize, people in businesses, this is looking into the individuals in businesses and thinking about how to help them to recognize the idea of ESG as a tool for them to make a richer world and a better future. And for those who don't understand the term ESG, it is a business term that grew about over the past probably decade now, on environment, social, and governance as being the three principles that businesses ought to be holding on to in that way. And of course, most recently this year, they have had gotten quite a lot of bad news about it in some sense. And Adam would explain about, kind of the way in which he actually helps people to navigate, again, navigating through climate changes involving all of these things, and navigate through those conundrums. So should we?
I think we should definitely play it, and he makes an excellent job of not only telling you what he's been up to before he started Finpublica, but also how he reasons around this very broad area. And not surprisingly, we think it makes eminent sense. But here is Adam. Doing good in particular, and what that actually means for us all. Thank you so much for being here, Adam.
No, thank you, Richard and David. Thank you very much for having me.
Definitely our pleasure.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah. So perhaps as a little bit just of a starting point, you've had an absolutely phenomenal career. I think anyone looking at your CV is just bowled over by the different things you have been doing through your career and the places you have worked and the actual work you have achieved. So just tell us a little bit how you ended up going down this particular route, and a little bit about your history for those who are not so familiar with you and your work.
No, thank you. So I am an attorney by training. Please do not hold that against me. I spent my first 15 years in private practice and as a partner at a global law firm. In that role, I focused a considerable amount on corporate governance issues, including representing the board of directors of Lehman Brothers in connection with all of the investigations, litigations, and corporate governance matters arising out of the 2008 financial crisis. And that was really a masterclass in why the G in ESG, why governance is incredibly important, because issues with governance can have a large impact, not just on a specific organization, but on our broader economy as well. After working with that board for 5 years, I had a pretty unique opportunity, which was to join the New York Stock Exchange and help them rebuild their market regulation program and reestablish their enforcement team to help assure that people who are trading on the exchange are doing so in a way that is safe, equitable, and fair. So again, that really did focus a lot on governance issues. While I was at the exchange, I also had an amazing chance to participate in a Aspen Finance Leadership Fellowship, which was a 2-year program sponsored by the Aspen Institute, bringing together finance leaders to focus on the question, how can finance be leveraged for a better society? And that is really where I focused a great deal of my attention on not just governance, but on ESG and sustainable finance in general. So that is my background up until today, when about a year ago, I handed the reins over to my deputy at the New York Stock Exchange and founded Finpublica, which is the organization which you just announced.
So do you want to tell us a bit about what Finpublica does?
Sure. Yeah. So Finpublica, we are a nonprofit platform that works to inspire and empower both current and emerging finance leaders globally to achieve their own environmental and social and governance goals. And we're really trying to do this through 3 planks. 1, cultivating a deeply engaged community. 2, providing expansive and accessible content. And then 3rd, serving as a catalyst for action.
Wow. So in terms of the engaged community, this is a community in how broad a sense?
Oh, I think great question. So we have 250 members in our first year. Opened up our doors in December of 2022, and those members come from more than 20 different countries and from all sectors of the financial services industry. And unlike some other ESG-focused organizations that focus on bringing on board corporates or funds, we're really focusing on bringing on board individuals, on people. And the reason for that is really threefold. Number 1, it's people who can pull the levers of change. 2, it is people who are passionate about these issues. And 3, by focusing on people, you can bring on board individuals whose organizations may not be as far along and ready to join a sustainable finance or ESG type of organization. But you can still bring on those individual leaders and get them really thinking and engaged on these issues.
I think you've just already kind of opened up the whole, I don't know what a term is, kind of thing where, because ESG and corporations and businesses and things is normally seen as, is the business doing good? And you've actually gone and said, actually, the people matter. And maybe the people is more important. And what led you to that perspective?
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, corporations are just a fictional construct.
Right.
I mean, yes, they're a legal entity. Who are they made up of? They're made up of people. Who works for them? People. Who do they serve? People. I mean, we think about E, S, and G, but really there should also be this other thought of a P standing for people. And we can't lose sight of the fact that everything that we're doing when we're thinking about sustainability is going to be done by and also for the people who are part of our communities.
Within the financial press, there's all the kind of rebellion against ESG. Within the activist crowds, there is a kind of a mantra or chanting of washing, of whatever color washing that it is. It's all just washing in some form or another. And there is a sense of calling on corporations as some sort of a disembodied entity to be doing better. And I think you've kind of said, look, you're calling it, you're shouting at the wrong door. In a way, right? Because they can't open any door because they don't have a body.
Right. And at the end of the day, by focusing on the people, you can also focus on not only the leaders, the people who are leaders of the corporations today, you can also focus on the emerging leaders of tomorrow. And it's one of those things where if we can start working with them while they're younger, while they're at the start of their careers, and thinking about this and not seeing a lot of daylight between what is finance and what is sustainable finance, and have them thinking about it in those terms, that's something that they're going to be able to bring with them and embody over the next 20, 30, 40 years.
I think it's a process you're describing that makes, in my mind, 100% sense. And I'm a little bit surprised people haven't really thought about it in those terms before, because it's completely logical when you say that if you get the people on board, you're going to get the organizations on board. But it's much harder to get the organization on board because you don't actually know who is going to speak for them. Here, you get the leaders on board. Of course, they are going to pursue that with whatever workplace they are at that point in time, because people might also change workplace and bring with them that knowledge and that understanding of what is needed to drive the process forward. So it's almost like, in a good sense, you get an infection, or you get that knowledge spread into the person, and that person can then go on. Regardless of what path you choose in life, you have managed to get to this stage where you have an understanding of the issues and how you can go about tackling them and bring that about in your own organization.
Exactly. And one of the things that we are also really trying to focus on is getting people from all different parts of the organization. So we want people who are focused day to day on sustainability. We do want people who are CSOs because they're going to bring in a whole lot of understanding and expertise and be of value to the community as a whole. But at the same time, we're looking to not just bring in those people. We want to bring in people from all parts of the organization, whether it's the folks who are in the finance office or the marketing office or the legal office, because at the end of the day, we don't want thoughts of sustainability to be siloed in just one part of an organization. Rather, we want all leaders from all parts of the organization to be thinking about it as part of their day-to-day.
So tell me, I mean, this is a remarkable transformation, right? You've gone from being a lawyer, a leading partner in a firm, to being an enforcement head in the Security Exchange Commission, and you woke up one morning and thought, that's it, you know, I've done my bit, I now need to do this, or what was the thing that kind of said, oh, this is the natural step, or was it a natural step at all?
It really was very much inspired by the Aspen finance experience, from the Aspen Fellowship. As part of the fellowship, you are supposed to come up with a venture. And my venture was a internally focused discussion group within Aspen, focusing on environmental, social, and governance issues. And there were a lot of members who said, hey, Adam, this is great, but can you help us move from talk to action? And I said, that's a great idea. Absolutely not. And the reason I said no was because at that point, I was still in a regulatory role at the New York Stock Exchange, and there were too many conflicts of interest. But once I handed the reins over to my deputy there, I said, you know what, this is a perfect opportunity to create what people have been saying that they want and what they are looking for, and an ability to create an organization that is not only going to inspire community and provide education, but also work with its individual members to inspire action. And that's really going to be the next step of Finpublica's journey.
So did those comments make you think about handing the reins over? Or were you thinking of handing the reins over and then this came along?
Oh, it was contemporaneous. At the end of the day, I had spent 8 years at the stock exchange. It was a wonderful experience, but more than I thought about what could be the next step, thinking about what is something that I can do that is really positive, that is really going to help move the ball forward for our people and planet. And that is a exciting opportunity. And
it's kind of like a police turning into a social worker.
That may be the case, though. When I was a defense attorney, a lot of my work was almost social work. I sometimes felt that I was the highest paid social worker because a lot of what I was doing was working with people who were facing, whether it was regulatory actions, losing their jobs, losing their careers, or in some cases even losing their freedom. Those people are facing what is the worst thing they're ever going to face. And they were really looking for somebody to basically be there for them, listen to them, and be a champion. So this is now a way to funnel some of those things, but for a even greater good.
So wow. So this is sort of a definitely long journey where you got exposed in some sense way back when you were a defense attorney in that way, and then the Security Exchange came along, and then essentially you're now kind of like a mentor in that way, and not only that. So when you talk about the next step as being the practical aspects of it, what do you envisage? How is that going? How might that look like? And are people clear about what they feel they need, or is this a journey together?
It is a journey together. And really, our goal isn't to say, okay, we at Finpublica think our members should be doing A, B, and C. Rather, it's a very bottom-up approach where we're trying to take a look at members and say, hey, what are the things that you want to achieve? And then how can we help you achieve them? So the way that we're going about this is through a working group model, where we have a member or two who might be interested in a specific topic. They can then reach out to other members and say, let's try to form a group that is focusing on that initiative. And then once we have that working group, those people can be moving towards that same goal, collaborating together, learning and helping one another. At the same time, having the Finpublica as an institution provide administrative support, research, and the like. So we just started our first few working groups, which are actually focused on ESG and sustainability in Africa. 40 of our members come from Africa, and around a dozen of them have gotten together to form this working group. And we're currently focusing on a few different potential initiatives. One is trying to categorize and catalog what are the key ESG regulations and initiatives in some of the larger countries that are more advanced in Africa on the sustainability space. And then we can basically take some of those ideas and package them for countries that may not be as far along and provide those as recommendations. But rather than saying, hey, here's what's worked in Europe or here's what's worked in the United States, we can say these are things that have worked specifically on the continent in particular. We then also have certain initiatives where we are focusing on other potential programs, whether it is trying to incorporate ESG and into small and medium enterprises in Africa, potentially with the aid of artificial intelligence, or focusing on how can we help smallhold farmers increase their access to capital at reasonable rates. So those are some of the additional initiatives that we are beginning to focus on, but that is we started those in 2023, and then next year, our goal is to expand the offerings, hopefully 2- or 3-fold, and put together projects not just in Africa, but in the US, in the EU, and elsewhere.
Okay.
Wow. It's very, very impressive. And you, despite only have been in existence a year, you're already managed to essentially reach all parts of the globe and all areas that you possibly can reach. It seems like an almost incredible journey. I can't think of many organizations that managed to achieve that in 12 months. When you decided to start Finpublica, did you already have the first steps laid out in your mind, what was needed to get to that point in 12 months? Or was it more, I know what it is I want to achieve, but let's see how we go about it when I see the people joining? Or had you already the vision pretty clear where you wanted to be at this point now?
I think we sort of had the broad strokes, but we then had to really listen to people and educate ourselves to focus on the details and how to get there. And we've had a lot of great partners along the way. So we have a founding board of directors that has been incredibly, incredibly active in helping us in our first year. We've had pro bono partners like the law firm of Wilson Sonsini, which has provided hundreds of hours of legal and other support. But one of the things that I was really not necessarily expecting, but has been the greatest terrific surprise, is how we've relied on university students and interns. So we've had more than a dozen interns to date from a number of different countries, from both undergrad and graduate school. And they have been absolutely incredible and invaluable in building the program. And they're also so inspiring because they are extremely talented, extremely passionate, and extremely devoted to trying to find ways to marry finance, but do it in a way that also serves stakeholders broadly. So shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, and the broader community. And they have been a fantastic part of this journey.
So I mean, we had some conversations with a number of different people. We had conversations with a lady called Sunita Gandhi, who runs a kind of primary school, global primary school for hundreds of thousands of people, where she has over 20 years improved a technique for helping children learn to read and write and do arithmetics, so they can become very effective, very fast. And the essence of it is they teach each other, they learn from each other. And in what you say when you talk about the mix of people, that you focus on the people, and I imagine, I don't know if this is right, I imagine this is everything from the junior associate who just joined last week to, you know, potentially some of the CEOs even, and they're just mixing there, and they get to work with each other in a way that they couldn't do in a corporate environment, because then you're the junior associate and I'm the CEO. But here, is that kind of how it is? Is that?
I think that is definitely part of what we are looking to achieve. And we haven't formalized the idea of co-generational co-mentoring yet, but we're hoping that that's going to at least be something that happens on a informal basis, because the more junior entry-level folks have a ton that they can learn from people who have 30 years of experience, but there's also a lot that we can learn from the people who are in the generation who are going to be battling these issues for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And
yes, I like the way you say that, actually, because the way the narrative goes is very much of saying that we got to get it done by 2030, and then somehow miraculously after 7 years all the problems are solved. Richard, let me pass it to you. My daughter's calling me at this moment, so I better pick her up.
Fair. No, I think what David describes, and he's so much better at making this analogy, which I absolutely love, that at a certain point on the savannah, you have all these animals, and the season is shifting because the animals understand intrinsically what needs doing. But then you have a couple in the herd that start moving, and the next day they become more. And then you have the bulk coming in the middle, and eventually towards the end, the last of the herd starts moving. And they don't know exactly where they're going, but they know they have to move. And they know roughly in which direction they're going to go, but they all go in different paces and at different moments in time, because you have just different points when you get to that actual understanding of what needs doing. And I think it's a fantastic analogy that David uses for describing how people just are not going to get to that point simultaneously. It doesn't work like that. And they're not going to go at exactly the same pace, because it doesn't suit everybody to run at Usain Bolt speed, and others will go at much, much slower speed. And they might have to go left before they take a right turn. But eventually we all end up in that place. And what you are describing seems to me exactly that kind of process.
No, I think that is certainly the case. And we have people who are at all different stage of their sustainability journey. And I think the important thing is to welcome as many people as possible. And some people, like you said, might be going 60 miles per hour. Some people might only be going half a mile per hour. But the important thing is to encourage people to begin taking those steps. And every step that we can take is going to move us in the right direction.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Richard and I debate a lot, and when we say debate, we basically swords drawn, pistols at dawn kind of debate about, which is really that we see the challenges ahead due to kind of climate devastation. So we take yesterday, for example, the UK, part of UK in Cumbria, the temperature dropped to -12 degrees from kind of low single digits overnight. It's just unheard of, that sort of thing. And Germany had Munich. I think the airports were shut, and they're used to heavy snow, and they could not cope with what was going on in those sort of transitions. And all of these cost companies, because it means that your staff can get to work, your goods can arrive at where they need to be, and your customers generally feel that they're not being looked after. So it all hurts kind of corporations and companies. And when you talk of ESG, there is a sense at the moment that my business is more important than GSG. Keeping my business going is more important than ESG. And ESG, incidentally, for anyone who is not used to this somewhat more financial language in there, it's like the SDGs for the social groups or sustainable development goals for society. ESG is essentially the goals for the businesses in that way, being about environmental, social, and governance in that sense. So how do they express that within your circles? Are they Richard would be saying, sort this, I'm going to hunker down, the best, my best play is don't get involved, because then I'll get sued if I get something wrong.
Well, we've tried to actually put together various panels and discussions on how to navigate between both pro and anti ESG regulations, and you can find those on our website. But I think at the end of the day, the way that many of our members see ESG is just additional tools. It's basically factors to consider in ways to evaluate and hopefully reduce risk, and then also ways to potentially seek opportunities to increase return. And again, when we're talking about these factors, we're not talking about it only in that we have to do this because it is somehow, quote unquote, a good thing to do. Hopefully it is a good thing to do, but we're also trying to tie it to how it is going to help the corporation and its stakeholders and shareholders more generally. So one of the things that we have on our website, which I'll give a plug for, it's www.finpublica.org, is we include all sorts of different resources for people to try to get up to speed on these issues really quickly without having to read a 70-page paper on the difference between the ISSB and the GRI. But one of the things that we've included are a whole bunch of studies that try to tie environmental, social, and governance factors to financial performance. Because again, especially for folks within the financial services industry who have to basically have fiduciary duties and have to focus on their shareholders and stakeholders and the like, we want to be able to show why focusing on these issues is actually good for the corporation.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense in my world. And I think something I often find when we're talking about these issues is I've spent my whole career in the financial industry. I haven't got the broad base that you have in your background, and you tend, because you get almost, for a better word, indoctrinated into that kind of thinking. And if you, like me, have managed risk your whole life, you'd always tend to revert to a risk perspective. Everything that I see and hear and think of outside the work is also a risk perspective. I drive my car, I think about those risks. I'm not going to go and take over someone on the blind corner. But when you come from that way of seeing the world and then you meet people who haven't got that background, for me, often it feels like there is disconnect, that people don't think in terms, unless you prod them and then discuss with them. And then it turns out, yes, they are also thinking in terms of risk. but they don't immediately see it because they have a different conditioning of the environment they have been brought up and they're working in. Is that something you encounter when you come from sort of the financial side, where I would imagine that explicit understanding of risks is more defined than it perhaps is in other industries?
I think that is true, because that is how analysts, whether you're at a bank or a hedge fund or a private equity, they basically take a look at the investments and take a look at the opportunities, and evaluating the risks is extremely important. So I think these are people who are going to be inclined to say, well, okay, climate change isn't just a generic bad, but how is it going to, the change in weather, how is it going to affect the supply chains? How is it going to affect the hurricanes that are happening in Florida, and what is that going to mean for insurance? There are all of these risks that are tangible that need to be taken into consideration. So ESG in that way is just another kind of tool to be considering those. But at the same time, we often focus on risks. I think it's also really important to think about opportunities. The climate transition is going to, or the energy transition is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity, which means that there are going to be ways that people can participate in it in a way that is going to be profitable for their organizations. And that's a good thing. What we want to do is have these carrots that are going to drive people to participate in the transition and help get us to where we need to be. And that's why things like the IRA in the United States are such incredibly important, because it is providing hundreds of billions of dollars to help companies essentially participate and benefit from the energy transition.
That's really interesting. I mean, there are several things you bring up along, and I'd like to pick the, if I remember them all along, my senior moments are getting more and more frequent. So the first one is this thing of its tool, because ESG sustainability is very often seen as a philosophy and not as a tool. So as a tool, it becomes actually really different. Just mentioning in that way, it's like, why wouldn't you want an extra tool, right? It's like, why wouldn't you just want an extra tool? If you can have an extra tool in your toolkit, you can go along, and if there's a screw around the corner, those ones where there's tiny space and you need a screwdriver that goes around the corner to do it, you've got an extra tool. You can do that. And that's really kind of a extremely insightful of what ESG should be. Whereas I think it had become like a philosophy, and you get regulators objecting to it because they're objecting to a philosophy. They fear that they are losing, the essence of free markets to serve people by imposing a more restrictive philosophy. And you're saying it's not a philosophy.
No, and really what we're looking at is what capitalists do all the time, is they are looking at risks and opportunities for return. And here looking at how can the environment, how can social, how can governance issues play into that. So it's basically, at least in my mind, as capitalist and free market as it comes.
And we absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And then it opens another side, which is where Richard and I come from, which is that in a world where resources are constrained, there are some things which are more important to do than others. And if you try to do everything together, then by definition, you can't, because it's constrained. So when companies go along through, I'm going to take some example. There's a debate at the moment over progress in green hydrogen. And one of the comments is simply that it takes a lot of renewable energy to make the hydrogen in the way we're doing at the moment, when that renewable energy can be used to actually displace the use of oil and gas and coal. Whereas by creating something new that we don't have an infrastructure to deliver it into, then what we're doing is we are persisting the continuation of oil and gas and coal. Now, those are arguments that goes along through. And the essence of those things become one of education, one of actually appreciating how we ourselves may feel that, and so on. So how do your members, how does your community get to debate those things?
Right. Well, I don't want to speak on behalf of the membership or the community as a whole, but I'll just talk about the way that I think about it, which is we're still, I think, really in the early stage of the transition, which means that I think we're going to want to try a lot of different things and experiment in a lot of different ways. And not everything is necessarily going to be successful, but I think it is still worth trying. And so if you have some people who are really invested in focusing on whether it's green or blue or turquoise hydrogen, then I think that's a good thing. And let's see what they can do. Whereas you might have others who are focusing on carbon capture, other focusing on methane reduction. There's some controversy over nuclear. In my own personal opinion, I think it can be a part of the solution. And there are some interesting companies that are now talking about recycling nuclear to basically be able to make it far, far more efficient. I think at this point, in my mind, we should be trying so many different things, and then let's see which ones work, and then we can double down our efforts into those. But that's just my own personal opinion, not speaking on behalf of anybody else.
Richard?
That's fair. Yeah. Something that struck me, and I'm going to rewind to the first time we spoke, and it was great making this connection with you. I think it's fantastic when you meet people who obviously share some basic views of life and the outlook in general, and also come from different perspectives because they have a different approach and they have done very different things in their life. And we started talking about what doing good actually means. And this is something every time we bring it up, people, they can get a little bit defensive, but most of all, it means so many different things to different people. There isn't a defined, clear thing about doing good means. But I think everyone, regardless where you are, whomever you work for, intrinsically, we all want to do good. And among all your members, there must be very, very different views of how you express this wish to do good. How would you sort of shepherd them all in when you have these discussions into allowing everyone to express their own opinion, but at the same time trying to, I imagine, not losing focus on something that I think we all want to achieve, which is doing good?
No, and I think it's important to understand that people have different definitions of what good means, different priorities, different ways of achieving it. But I don't see them as a zero-sum game. Just because, Richard, you are focusing on one issue doesn't mean that I can't also help David try to focus on something that is important to him. And what we're actually trying to do is rely upon the diversity of different viewpoints of our members and different priorities and beliefs in order to sort of move the ball forward in a bunch of different directions. And because at the end of the day, I think there are many things that we want to be focusing on. You may have some people who are really focusing on reducing greenhouse gas, and let's help them do that. But there might be other people whose priorities are, how do you address economic disparities and economic justice issues that have been present in society for hundreds of years? And let's also help those people work on those issues as well. So I think it's important to be able to see the good in what everybody's doing and try to encourage and grow it. And just because somebody might be growing tomatoes and somebody might be growing cucumbers and somebody might be growing potatoes doesn't mean that's a bad thing. In fact, the diversity of those vegetables or fruits basically contributes to basically a much better life for all of us.
So what you're saying, if I get what where it takes me to in listening to it, is that it's being together that's the most important part. Is that we can come together, find our paths in our way, but knowing that we're not doing that on our own, and our various experiences and our various wisdom and kind of mistakes are there to guide everybody along. We don't need to be defensive about our own journey. We don't need to feel we are an imposter in our own skin. We can simply be who we are in that way. But it's a community, and it's a community with an aim, and the aim is really a richer world and a better future. And that ultimately means that there are certain clear that seems to have come to a slightly abrupt end.
Indeed. Not sure what happened with it, because that's not how we ended the video, but
no,
that's how we will end it for tonight. And it's also about 15 minutes prematurely, given the expected runtime. So something clearly happened, but we can rectify that. And I'd also think that we would like to show his final arguments for why this is a very good thing and how he defines it as making the world better. What do you think here, David? Are we not focusing enough, like Adam says, on people?
We don't focus on people. We absolutely don't focus on people. I mean, this is the discussion from the earlier conversation with the younger generation in that way, right? And today, in where we are, if you look at COP, the objective is amount of money. The objective is the amount of energy. The objectives are those things. And if you go back to our prayer today, every day we have at 2:00 a prayer meditation, and they are very good for me, and I hope for other people, in terms of anchoring and recentering where these things are. And today was from Sister Margaret, and she took us down this path of saying, we all have our role, our individual roles, but our roles is not to necessarily solve the whole problem. And this goes to the conversation that was early previously. If you set your choice to be the one to fix the whole problem in that way, you set yourself down this path of saying, how do you persuade the 8 billion other people to do that? And when you do that, you end up going down a path where, as many people have said in yesterday and previous days, about, are you doing it at home yourself, or are you just doing it so that the other person is forced into doing it? And we see that so much. You have all the chatter that normally comes along with private jets flying into Dubai and all the rest. And of course, there are reasons for it and so on. But the choice is always there that maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you all should just share a flight or something like that. And these sort of situations come along, and by focusing on the individual, what he's actually saying is very much in line with the other conversations we've had. It's very much saying, as your description of my comments about the wildebeest on their migration. Eventually, we're all on the path. The migration has started. We are going through. We have seen so many evidence from people talking about the work that they do. And when they do that, the interesting thing that comes out, and that has really broadened the perspective, is that it brings up all the problems of a hugely embedded and vested sort of infrastructure that we have. And you know, when the Girl Guides leader in Kenya is talking about sex for food,
Yeah.
and how they tackle that with the young girls, and how they do that they have to do that in collaboration with the community, because otherwise it doesn't work along in that way. And that again is approaching it from an individual perspective. Each person is different in that part. And we had that in the same way with Rob Delat talking about reforesting the Amazon rainforest. And he talks about how each acre is different. The way you treat that land, the way you nurture the tree there, in that same way. And so we end up with this aspect that our own humanity, our own kind of journey, is the same healing as what we were trying to produce and develop. And where there is this part where, you know, the comment about, sure, you can just throw seeds with drones, but if you don't nurture seeds, it's like trying to say, I leave all the babies outside, you know, at 1 week old, leave them outside, wait till they come back at 10, 21 and says, where's my money? It just doesn't work.
It's very unlikely that it will. Let's be honest.
It just isn't going to work, right?
No.
And that's the thing between this attitude of scale. Everybody talks about capacity, we talk about scale, but in doing that, they're missing out that an individual is not about capacity. If you're going to reach an individual, and that's what's so amazing about what Finpublica does, and that's what's so amazing about what, you know, Adam Basselman's doing in that way.
Yeah.
He's reaching out through the individual. We had that again with Barbara Castro earlier today in the conversation. There she is in Las Vegas as part of the Rotary there, and they're planting trees, each tree for the name of the president of a Rotary. They plant it in the schools, you know, so that the children know this is what the Rotary did for you. And in that way, she's not trying to do the 10 billion trees. It's more modest, but in some ways, it's much more transformative. And those aspects, the small steps, as Sadia Khalik mentioned earlier in the week, in her efforts within Pakistan.
Yeah.
And Miguel, on the conversation, you know, another evening, while you were having your wonderful dinner, Inga and I had this conversation with Miguel in Peru, who talked about the education taking on from Sunita Gandhi's Alpha program into the Amazonian, the Peruvian Amazonian forest, not the Brazilian side, the Peruvian side of it. You know, in the small little classes. And you think, in the world today, why does that matter on this large scale? You know, these people, why does that matter?
Yeah. Profound questions on a Wednesday night, but the ones that
but it goes back right
about.
Yeah, but it goes right back down to what Andrea Mason was saying last night. You know, what is it that really matters to you?
Yeah.
Because if you go by the numbers, if you go by the climate finance and the climate attitudes in that sense, in a lot of those things, you lose the humanity. You're all supposed to be there to be fixing it for everybody, but what you end up in essence is doing is you're replacing one massive set of vested interests with another massive set of vested interests. But what people are doing individually is breaking that down, and that I think people are not even aware is happening. The young people speaking this evening, they're not really aware that's happening, because within the more developed countries, within the richer countries, there's so much of social structure, there's so much this attitude that somehow the state provides.
Yeah.
That they presume that is all, it has taken away their agency, the ability to go ahead and say, you know what, I can do this. But when we speak, when we hear the voices of the people from Gambia, the people from, you know, kind of the Democratic Republic of Congo,
yeah,
they speak with agency. they speak to say, I'm going out there and this is what I do. I go to a school, I work with the children, James Kamal, I go there and I talk to the kids and I say, you eat fruit? And they say, yes. I said, well, where's the fruit? Where are the seeds? And they say, what seeds? Well, these are the seeds. And he says, when you eat a mango that's really sweet, that's the seed you want to plant.
Yeah.
And in that way, he teaches them more about genetics than the textbooks will. But in that way, they become empowered with their own food security, and they have their own agency. But here in London, you don't have that because you don't think of that.
So how do the younger generation, but actually all of us, irrespective of age, in the developed, rich world, how do you recapture that agency?
I think again it is. I don't know. I mean, what do you reckon? I think it's harder here, and we've been working with a lot of people who do the sort of live simply type things, and we're communicating a lot of them, and a large number of them do all manner of things, right? Within their parishes, within their communities.
Yeah.
There are many people who do the food banks and who do all those things too. So it's equally common, it's equally many, but their voices are not really heard in that way. And it goes down to, when we were writing our book, The Unsustainable Truth, and we got towards this part about, when we started talking about the rationalization that we do.
Yes. How we justify with hindsight our actual decisions that have been taken.
Yes. And how rationalization is one of the main issues. And we saw these clips from the business school at the University of Texas. And there's this young lady there being interviewed who said, it's like my superpower, rationalizing. I can rationalize anything. I think we've become like that. It has become our superpower. And taking that personal responsibility, that individual choice, that choice where you actually internalize the choice, you'd be saying, well, of course, I can't say what other people will do and I can't influence them, but this is what I am. And that part, but that again goes down to what we talk about, the unsustainable truth. The part that gives hope, the part that Tim Smith said, holds out the hand of hope. It's because in recognizing these choices, in recognizing it is our individual choice, in recognizing that we need to experiment to find our own path, to figure out whether this is the right thing, which is a fantastic thing about what Adam Basselman's doing with Finpublica.
Yes. He hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously he's, you can tell he's a former defense attorney. He's very well spoken. He's very
well. You'd like him to be a lawyer, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Oh,
you like him to be a lawyer.
First time I get accused, I'm gonna hire him. That's for sure. But at the same time, when he's articulating this lack of focus on people, or how we have overlooked the people in the process in favor of these non-entities, to make sure that they join various setups and organizations. I'm somewhat puzzled how we can, for so long, have neglected that obvious fact that it's actually people who make decisions. It's actually people who influence others. It's actually people who ultimately populate the planet.
Well, again, back into what we were talking about in the unsustainable truth. It's not the corporations, it's the owners.
Yeah.
The governance is not the board of governors, it's the individuals.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the way businesses work is that owners are owners. They provide the mandate. And they, even when it's owned by 1 million people, 10 million people,
Yeah, still there's a human behind that ownership. It's not a grey nebulous entity, and true governance starts from there, by actually taking responsibility for your actions and exercising the right that you have that comes with ownership. Well, these are really profound thoughts, and no doubt will we continue during the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th day of COP, when I will again test David what it actually says in the song, given that, you know,
Yes.
it's his native language, not mine. So I'm sure he's going to rehearse for tomorrow to check what the 7th day of Christmas brought.
Well,
however,
yes.
We also have other things for you tonight.
Yes, yes. Do we want to see whether Morris is available, or do we want to?
We can check on Morris, I think, a little bit later for the closing, so we can close on a bright light. Nice note.
Well, it'd be very late for him to do that, right?
It will. It's already.
How long is our talk with Christoph?
I think Christoph is just shy of half an hour.
Okay, so let's see whether he's available, and if he is, we can get you know, a few minutes, and then we can go on to Christoph and see.
Indeed, if you try to bring him in.
Yes. In the meantime, he's another bit earlier about, you know, that I had. Here's a minute's worth of more of that intergenerational conversation, if I can find it. I think someone might have deleted it.
That would be very unfortunate.
Shame.
Who has had access to our library and not taken responsibility for it? This is a lack of governance, let me tell you that.
It is indeed the case, yes.
I wish someone would just hold their hand up and own up to the fact that they deleted something they shouldn't have done. But there you go. Sign of the times, perhaps.
This is like, yeah, it's they'll probably say it wasn't me.
Yeah, we've all been guilty of that at times, I guess.
Only you.
You know, what really is the message, you know, for people who face this? Are you hopeful to how the world is? Are you
kind of? I think we'll figure it out, but I think it will be slightly too late.
Does that bother you?
Pardon?
Is that bothering you?
No, to be honest. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight. You know, it's not going to be one day we wake up and all hell's broken loose. I think it's going to be a very gradual burn. So I think it will still. I think we'll still survive another generation after. But I think life will just be extremely different, and I've very much come to terms with that. But that's just because I think I maybe think about it more than the average person. So, what do you think?
Maybe it's more of a lack of faith in humanity, but that's more your. I mean, that's the message you're trying to spread, isn't it? It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be the Hail Mary fix every time. It can come from small things, and it can come from one person at a time. But there's not many things the world is kind of agreed on. And it's difficult to see. I mean, climate change is one of like the big major topics that gets talked about, isn't it? So, and yet there's still like everyone wants to be able to live and have a wonderful planet and to live sustainably. Yet for some reason it doesn't happen.
I think that's probably why I've kind of in my head I'm like, oh, it might not work out. We are saying the lack of faith in humanity, because obviously even if 50% completely commit, 60, 70, 80%, there's still the people that are like, climate change doesn't exist, you know. And think about the whole pandemic, like we did relatively well as a whole planet, but there were still people who had COVID that didn't care about going out without a mask on, you know? There's still people that wouldn't sanitize their hands or care about spreading it.
Yeah.
So we did incredible as a planet, but there was still just that.
I think it's really weird. I think
But
being...
I guess it doesn't have to be perfect though, even if 80%'s doing it.
I feel like there's a consensus of it. It's just confusing. I think that is probably like it's just confusing because it's probably wrong to say what I said before actually, because there are people like yourself and Richard, and then there are also people our age and all over the world coming up with amazing, fantastic ideas that aren't harming the planet and helping. But then you have the opposite side of it where it's you get people who don't think it exists or don't want to be part of certain things. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's that's probably us not thinking in the best mindset. That's the all or nothing mindset. Like even if people are doing something, it's better than nothing. Even if it's still a bit more of a majority and there's still this percentage, it's still making a difference. So I think it will be prolonged a lot. Like we will make a difference in fighting back. Like we'll put up a really good fight.
Yeah, I do think the I don't know, I think the message that you have that comes across, and you get it just from watching, like I've been watching it, but I have service in between going on the train and stuff because you're always streaming all the time, which is brilliant, so it always works. But I think yeah, I don't know, it's just really positive. I think it's a bit different. And I think that's what is lost a lot in today, slightly. I don't know.
I think
it's a bit negative to think that they too.
Yes, sorry to interrupt. It's kind of putting the joy and peace into the change, as it is kind of a big scary subject, but the way you're proposing it is in a comforting way, to be honest.
Yeah. I just feel like there's never going to be necessarily. There's not a clear path to like, oh, I could do this and then this and then this and then everything will be fixed. Although there are steps like not buying a banana splitter. There are
exactly.
There are steps that you could do. It's just
I have thought of a use. Somebody's just had surgery or a disabled person, but I know it's a gay soft peel it.
Knife or mush it. Or you just eat it, don't you?
Yeah, eat it. The really good way. Yeah. No, there is no use at all.
There we go. How are you there? That banana split is always there, isn't it? You just can't get rid of it.
It's brilliant.
But it's interesting. This, the conversation went from sort of you can't do it or nothing to recognizing the small steps. Yeah. And it reviewed another part that we have this sort of sense that we all have to in this sort of COP type thing, in this thing, we all have to go together, but actually we all have to go at our own pace. It's not the mantra. We all have to change. The truth is we have to change. The world is changing. We need to change too.
Yeah, of course we are. The question is whether we will be able to do it on our terms or have them dictated to us down the road by the planet. I prefer to have the choice now.
No, I don't think that's right, because we are being dictated by the planet. This is the tyranny of the planet. We were talking with Prism art project.
Yeah, but that's only going to get worse. We still have maneuverability. Yes. So if you don't change today, how are you going to change tomorrow?
It doesn't matter whether you have the maneuverability or not. It's the question of whether you carry one bag or you carry your entire household's, kind of chateaus with you. It's your choice in that way. It's your choice as to how you want to go along in this journey. And it's a choice of recognizing that actually the resources are what you have around you, but waiting around for how you think resources need to be available for you is not necessarily going to help. Because what that does is it makes you dependent on conditions that you have no control over. So it takes away your agency again. It makes you feel that the money has to be there before you can do anything. It makes you feel that the panels have to be there. But anyway, we have a guest who is having a birthday today, and he's a musician. We've seen him, interviewed him before. His name is Halisi Monray. Let's welcome him. Hello. Hi. You Morris or you're Halisi Monray at the moment? It's your birthday. Happy birthday. So just
at the moment,
happy birthday. Yes.
At the moment, I'm Morris.
So let's give you a happy birthday. So happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Morris. Happy birthday to you. I'm Richard.
So no voice, even at the best of times, and today even less than a voice, unfortunately, as it's giving up on me. So how many are they today?
How many years of birth have you had or date?
I'm 24. I'm turning 24.
Really? Wow. Gosh,
I remember that time. It was great period. God.
Yeah.
Life was good, 24.
So what's the best moment of your 24 years?
my best moments of 24 years, I think, was when I released the album last year.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That to me has always been a highlight this whole year.
Yes.
And of course, that was when I joined Rethinking Choices.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's when David Ko reached out on my website, and then we linked up on WhatsApp.
Yes.
It's been a journey.
It has been on a journey, hasn't it?
Pardon?
It has been a journey.
Yeah, it has been a journey. So I'm just thankful that you guys have made my 24th or my 23rd year like amazing.
But it has been a tough year for you too. It has been a tough year for everybody. It's been a tough year for you.
Yeah, it has been like a year that I have had to be a support system.
Yep.
In moments of crisis. It has, even when I felt like I was not enough, I was not well prepared. I just had to be there, and I thank God that David has not shied away from sending well-wishing messages. And right now I'm expecting a birthday present.
I'll tell you, I'll play you a song. How about that?
You have been running away from that.
You like this song?
Let me hear.
She says she'll never come home. Ati huku hapati ya money. Pretty baby, I know I did you wrong. Ndo maana ninakuomba samahani. I was up in my zone. Lady nkajifanya sijali. I don't wanna end up all alone. Baby nakutaka nyumbani. Wait for you. Baby I'll wait for you. Even if it means for a lifetime. Oh my babe, I'll wait for a lifetime. All for you. I'll give it all for you. Even if it means one last time. Oh my babe, I'll give you one more time. Ninaendana nawe, and I don't know what to do without you. Tumetoka mbali, I say, na bado safari nusu. Yule akupenda, ni yule who wants to follow you. So wacha nikufuate we, kapingu nawe mahabusu. Ninaendana nawe, and I don't know what to do without you. Tumetoka mbali, I say, na bado mahabusu. Wait for you, baby, I'll wait for you. Even if it means for a lifetime, oh my babe, I'll wait for a lifetime. All for you, I'll give it all for you. Even if it means one last time, oh my babe, I'll give you one more time.
Nitasitiri, taswira yako wanga inanikuta baby boo. Nataka twende mbali, nitasubiri kwa ujasiri, hasira zisije zikanikatiza safari. Baby, vile nakukunda, ulinivuteka kuvuta mau, ulingo wa mapenzi ukaninogeshe sasa kwako mitulivu, you natural beautiful. Oh, my African queen, I will wait for you.
Wait for you, baby, I'll wait for you. Even if it means for a lifetime, oh my babe, I'll wait for a lifetime. All for you, I'll give it all for you. Even if it means one last time, oh my babe, I'll give you one more time. Wait for you for a lifetime, for a lifetime. Give it all for you last time.
There you go.
Thank you. That's a very special song to me.
Yes. You want to? Yeah.
I wrote it after that period was like there were a lot of couples killing each other.
Oof.
So it was all over the news. Like every time there is lovers who are fighting, killing each other. So I was writing a song like, instead of hurting your other person, just leave and tell them you'll wait for them.
Yes.
And even if the time is not right, you can still, even if things are not right, you can still like give them a chance one more time. But you don't have to hurt or kill anyone because of love.
Well, that's a great thing to end on, I think.
Yeah.
So we need to move on, and so we'll get you back another evening. But thank you very much, and happy birthday.
And happy birthday indeed.
And it's going to start looking up from now. That's the present. It's going to start looking up from now.
I need a shoe. It's only 2,500.
So thank you. So Richard, off we go.
That was Morris live from Kenya. And, turning 24 today. And now we're going to move over to another very young man, not quite as young, but one I had the pleasure of interviewing last week for this program, when we spent almost 2 hours together talking about various sustainable practices in farming. And this is the third and final episode where we're really moving on to the biggest dangers that he's seeing. His name is Christoph Hayes, as you well know. He's incredibly bright. He's a very driven young man with ideas about how we need to practice farming going forward. And here is the cautionary tale what might lie ahead if we don't actually address these issues going forward. It's a little bit like I once had a boss long time ago, and we were discussing compensation. And there is always a formula in the business where you get X amount of the profits because you've been the guy effectively making that money, but others have left a contribution, and how do you share the pie, etc. And I was very young at the time. I think I was like 22, 23. And you're looking at your first bonus, right? And he kind of explained a concept which has stuck with me. And he said, it's very easy for you to push this argument vis-a-vis the growth of a startup, for example, and say, I want to maximize this now. But you will find over time that what makes you really wealthy and really rich in any business is to be long-term greedy. And then we can discuss what long-term greedy means in this case, he said. And it kind of resonated with me in a weird way, although I still made a case for why I should get paid more, obviously. That if you have the ability to lift your vision beyond the first obstacle on the road and say, I need to clear that, we're all working under economic constraints, and those are fair because they're real life constraints. What actually makes you wealthy over the long term is the ability to perhaps not pick up the most easy dollars you see on the garden path. And one who kind of portrayed that, I think, in a pure investor concept is actually Warren Buffett, when he said, my preferred holding horizon is forever. Well, if you're going to hold things forever, you cannot really be too worried about what's going to happen next quarter, next year, or perhaps even the next 10 years. But you need to stay in the game. You need to stay in the game, and you need to prove to the interested parties and your stakeholders that you're delivering value.
This is really interesting, and it makes me think about essentially your work. When you and David introduced yourselves on one of our first calls, you described your background in managing pension funds, and by default you have a long horizon there. And I wonder if, in terms of the long-term goals that not just my business has, but many other people have, in terms of seeing ecosystems regenerate. I mean, that's our long-term kind of future as a species on this planet. If we subscribe to that view, then maybe we need that type of mentality where where we're able to take short-term compromises in comfort or whatever. I'm not sure how to call this, but to kind of have these long-term bigger goals, essentially. And I mean, that aligns very well with the startup mentality, the founder mentality, because you're essentially putting up with you're doing a lot of upfront work with maybe a payday one day. And actually, if you dig down, and this is why I really like the startup context and working with founders, close to founders, is if you dig down, actually the driving motivation for a lot of them is something other than financial gain, short-term financial gain. Because if it was that, they'd be out there doing a job that pays better and doing it again. And so I've met some really incredible people in startups who have a long-term goal, and the mechanism that they use to get there is a startup. And I think that's why I gravitated towards this world. Is I love the freedom and the ability to kind of come up with your own path, and this ability to plan long term and to sort of imagine a future where you have made that impact, and that's great, and people can come along with you on that journey. And I think that's kind of what we're both talking about. So
I totally see your lens through which you see the world and the work you're doing, and it actually, strangely enough, it's probably quite similar to my lens in many ways. Something that struck me when we're talking about the long horizon and actually supposed to be greedy for the long term, do you find that it's different talking to, for example, family farmers that have been doing this for generations compared to a corporate setup where you have perhaps an accountant running the business and not the farmer? Because my perception has always been, and it doesn't matter what you grow, if you are a farm of any sort that's been going for generations, you kind of just look after the land. It's not even yours. You're the caretaker of that particular, inheritance being passed down, and that makes you see the whole enterprise through a very, very different lens and in different light compared to, an assembled farm that uses, perhaps even pension money.
Yes, yes. This is, I mean, Richard, describing yourself as not a farmer, but being able to place your finger on this concept, it makes you an ally, and I'm sure it would be appreciated. Yeah, I mean, look, you've really hit the nail on the head with the multi-generational thinking, or not sure what the right word is, but kind of beyond just you, beyond just your short-term kind of objectives. And one example that springs to mind here is another farming business who have been really great to us as early kind of, they're just fans, you know, they encourage us, and they are quite close to where we are here in London. They're down in Kent, and so it's kind of the backyard like R&D facility, and they just have an open farm gate type policy, and we go down, and Doug Wanstall, the farmer there, they're called Regeneration Earth. So Doug and Richard run a regenerative farming business, and also a kind of consultancy where they help other businesses through the advice that, you know, through the learning that they've done. But Doug says he's the family farmer there, and his family have been there for, you know, multiple generations. I think they have a barn building that's like, you know, 400 years old or something. I mean, incredible. And he goes in there, you know, he hosts people, he welcomes people onto the farm, and he says, I am just one in this generation, in this family. I'm one generation, and the responsibility on my shoulders is not to, you know, the responsibility is to keep it going, is to make sure that this farm building this barn is still here in another 300 years time. And, you know, his journey was, and maybe you ought to interview him, but, you know, he sort of saw that the industrial, so something was broken, that he wasn't, if he carried on doing what he was doing, it wouldn't allow him to do that for 300 years. And so that was his starting journey on kind of engaging with regenerative principles. So that's a really good concept, and I think it can translate into, not that I have extensive experience with boardrooms, but I think there's sort of thinking now, or like there's sort of ideas, I think, in business based on the books that I read, that if you've come up with a business or a project that is commercial, and you really want that to be long term, you have to bake into its culture, its operation, these mechanisms that will allow it to proceed beyond just you. And you know, not just in terms of scaling a team in the here and now, but kind of the future impact, kind of safeguard the future impact that you're going to have as well. And I think that would be really good to explore. You know, I wonder if we're going to have MBAs in regenerative business, right? I would love that. I'm
sure we will have. You know, it's because the area is so vast, and I think people are just starting to realize, and actually questioning more than realize, that some of the concepts we've taken for granted for, you know, certainly decades, perhaps not even close to a century in the business world, might not be totally ideal. Because my bear bug is really that the future has no value, and clearly it has. So how do you square that particular circle? Something that comes to mind, and this is really very much a practical consideration, you know, like you described, you need to hit certain target and moving ahead without too many bumps in the road, but you still have this vision of where you want to achieve. How do you manage to align and stay focused on the really long-term vision by ticking off the boxes and saying, well, I need to deliver this and I need to do that? And because you need clients, and clients are short-term demanding, but you have this longer-term vision. Is it difficult to stay focused on the horizon, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to experience it more in the coming years. I think this year has really been about experimentation, and I really want to keep that at the core of what I do. It doesn't have to be the core of what List does. You know, maybe List becomes really good at something that they do, and they replicate that. But I think in order for me to have the long-term focus, I need to make sure that I'm able to pick up these, you know, sometimes you describe them as sort of wacky ideas before, you know, and chew them over and see what bits kind of give me nutrition and build that into the pathway. So yeah, I think that's the way. I can feel myself being, I can see the priorities changing, and my own schedule changing as a result. So that will be an interesting challenge. I think selecting mentors for the business, but also mentors individually. I mean, I never underestimate the amount of knowledge that you can get from someone who's experienced, even in a context that isn't your own. So there's some really interesting farm managers out there who might be working in the real industrial context, but they're human. They're not blind to the same issues that we're facing. And so, for example, talking to them on over a long term and kind of, you know, having different positions, but exchanging, that is really helpful. And you know, I work with someone called Andrew from Team Ag UK, whose career was farm management, estate management, really large farms, and you know, they've got an even bigger kind of ship to turn around. But they kind of see people like myself, kind of idealistic, kind of young engineers, maybe with limited experience, but there's something there, right? We exchange, we periodically meet up, and there's a kind of mutual respect for what we do. But the same goes on a sort of more personal level, or you know, I'm interested in kind of economics, so I often talk to people who are interested in, on the one hand, mainstream classic, you know, growth-based economics, because that's why we are where we are today, and that's, you can judge it, you can not judge it, but that's the fact. And at the same time, kind of thinkers who are reimagining that, and you know, have different visions for economics. So I think these kind of individuals who are able to shape your vision long term, and you have a personal relationship with, and it doesn't have to be regular. It's not like a friendship. It's not like a friendship who, you know, you complain about, you know, your relationship to, but it's somehow a sort of guiding rail, or I don't know, kind of source of new inspiration. And I think people are important in that. Sort of having.
I think it's incredibly important. You know, being a fair bit older than you, I could definitely say that it's been incredibly beneficial to my professional journey to have people. I might not even speak to them more than once a year, but when you speak to them, you know, they will, for a better word, advise you or have a very frank and open discussion, because there will never be a hidden agenda that you need to consider, you know, their position, etc. And they're actually not that easy to find. And I think I've been very, very lucky. And I know friends of mine who have not really had those kind of relationships, for a better word. And wisdom is, you know, a very, very precious commodity, if we want to label it wisdom. But there is some form of accumulated knowledge and learning who gets passed on because of your experiences, your education, but also your personality. And how you get shaped by a combination of all those. So I know, taking a lot of your time here. You're a super busy guy and all the rest of it, but I could spend so much more time with you. But I'm probably going to go towards rounding up in some form here. And something that's worried me for a long time is what we described early on, the quite damaging farming practices we have seen for a century, since the tractor probably came. In many ways, it has a lot to answer for. It was a great tool, but it also has a lot to answer for. Out of all these things we read about, we see on news, we're talking about, rapidly declining insect population, particularly bees are a major concern that seem to be so susceptible to certain pesticides. Water depletion, topsoil depletion, and you can correct me here if I'm wrong, but I think I read some quite extensive article that essentially, despite fertilizing more, despite monocropping harder, etc., crop yields are effectively stagnating in the developed world here. This seems to be like we've hit the roof of how much we can extract per hectare or square kilometer, whatever we measure. Out of all these things that I see, and I can sense that you share them, which one worries you the most?
I am actually worried about water a lot, water availability, because I can see that our rapidly changing climate has a very direct consequence on the way we experience water on our crops, on our landscapes, sure, but including our cropping systems. And once we start having crop failures, extensive crop failures, then we're into the realms of, really tough decisions around food access. We're not only talking about pricing, we're talking about access to food. And that's a kind of paradigm that I don't think my generation or even the generation before can truly understand. And that scares me. Me. And I think the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is I believe that there are solutions to this. And we had a workshop on farm a couple of weeks ago with a guy called Niels Caulfield, whose motto is the kind of climate resilient farm. And the sole purpose is to kind of look at soil and make sure that you turn it into a medium that is able to store water in extreme weather conditions. So when you've got a lot of water coming, make sure you store it. But when you have really dry periods, which are coming, and you'll need water from somewhere. And the benefits, again, are multiple. Better crop yields, but also things like less flooding. Real economic. If you're an insurance company, you might want to, pay attention, because by protecting soil, by funding regenerative agriculture, you might get outcome. You might have a lower, number of claimants on flooded housing. So there's some really interesting links there, but that's what I feel is really around the corner, and I think we should be quite aware of. It's simple. Water is so simple.
I feel much less like a geek now, because now there's someone else who shares my kind of keeping me up at night fears. And I'm a fair bit older than you. My generation, at least growing up in Sweden, there was not a consideration ever that there wouldn't be food around. If you speak to my mom, who is now in her mid-80s, and she was born before the Second World War, Sweden wasn't in the war, but you had basically blockades. There wasn't a lot of food coming in, so Sweden had to become quite self-sufficient. She would always say that there was food to eat, but it was always the same food, which probably meant potatoes, I'm guessing. So there was no sense of real food scarcity, just less ability to choose because you kind of ate what you were given. But when I used to speak to my dad, who's no longer with us, and he was a bit older than my mom, he would have been mid-90s now, growing up in Italy, in pre-World War II Italy through 1930s, apart from the whole political system that reigned at the time, he would always tell me that he considered himself very, very lucky when he said, we never ever went hungry. And that was a real consideration in the 1930s. And we're talking less than 100 years ago.
Exactly.
But you probably need to get to that generation in our part of the world to have experienced what food scarcity really means.
Yes.
And if we shock the system, and I like looking at key variables of how much food supply do we have in case something really adverse happens, whether it's storms, tornado hitting, and you start disrupting, because what the last couple of years have shown with, for me, increased clarity is how incredibly leveraged our world has become on everything actually functioning like it's supposed to do.
Yes. Very little margin for.
There are no buffers.
Yeah.
There are no buffers. Like, ship doesn't get through Suez. You don't have a line of clothing. You don't have those spare parts in the industry because the ship is waiting to go through Suez. You have the same thing with the Panama Canal now. Stuff is not getting through, and then you need to start flying it in, and it becomes a lot more costly. Food, for a better word, we have taken it totally and utterly for granted that it's not only going to be available, but that's exactly what I want should be available. I want to eat avocados year round. I want to eat grapes year round. Whatever I go to the shelf and find, I want to eat it all year round. Do you think that that particular notion of us always being able to have whatever we want at the fingertip is changing?
Yes. Well, I wonder if yes, this is a really complex and somewhat scary picture that you paint, Richard. But I know you're doing it for the right reason. You're sort of asking people to start thinking about these things, and I'm sensitive to it because in a way my father probably does what he does in food for the same reasons. He doesn't come from a farming background, but he's passionate about it and passionate about the impact that it can have. And so I'm somewhat sensitive to these arguments. I think what we have as responsibility as consumers, particularly in the wealthy parts of the world, is to start looking at our dollar spend and the impact that has, and what type of impact are we funding, negative or positive? What type of change in the world are we funding through our pension contributions, but also through our day-to-day spend, like the food shop? And I'm not a saint. I mean, I go to the supermarket and I'll buy the items that are on offer because I'm living in London and rent's expensive and my gas bills are through the roof, right?
Yeah.
But I think it requires this real real kind of squaring of our patterns, our consumption patterns, and recognizing that we will continue to buy food, and where that money goes is really quite important, because it's quite a large part of our economy. It's quite a large part of our daily spend, and so I think that's a really good point that you raised, Richard. And we have to see ourselves as actors in that system. As consumers, we have power. We have community power, essentially. And there's certain examples where food systems become much shorter, and you access food from a known source, and you pay a premium, but you understand better that what you're buying is not just the pure calories, but you're buying an experience, or you're buying the knowledge that farmer is able to make a decent living, or the landscape around that farm is being regenerated. And that works. I hope that works at scale, and I'm sure it does. And there's some really cool brands.
Why wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be my first question. Why wouldn't that work at scale? And you almost have to think about it as, I'm buying the product, but I'm also buying the insurance that product will be available to me tomorrow, next year, and 10 years from now. And what is that insurance actually worth? Clearly, 5 years ago, no one thought about paying anything for that insurance. I think today people are looking at it and saying, you know what? We probably should be paying something for that actual insurance of having the product available.
And we talked about home insurance, but this could equally be health insurance, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
A higher nutritional shopping basket might mean that you actually visit the doctor less and you have a better well-being and a lesser burden on on the financial system that's funding the health system. So yeah, I mean, there's really interesting synergies there, and I think it's kind of interesting to frame ourselves as not just, you know, this kind of food consumption is not just a bodily function of eating and continuing, you know, eating for energy, but it's an exchange. You know, I get something, I get an experience. We, you know, sometimes all go to a nice restaurant to sort of treat ourselves. It's not just the sensory experience. You have a waiter who maybe explains how this is made, and you might see the chef cooking in the back, and you think, well, yeah, this is a fair trade. It's people are working hard here. There's good produce. I come away, I've had a really nice meal. I feel fed. I feel nourished. I've had a nice evening. We should start seeing food consumption as that in our home, in our day, in our around our table every evening, and that could be, that's a really nice kind of image to uphold and to feed, I guess, feed with my work, and I'm sure many other people are working on it too.
Yeah, I can only concur with that. You know, it's ultimately our economic system is built upon the choices of our spending, and we actually have the power to direct that. So people should not feel powerless, because what you do with your dollar in your pocket actually matters for the economy at large. And you're describing it incredibly well. And all these things, I suspect, at the end of the day, are somewhat interconnected. It's not just about, you know, where I buy the muesli I eat in the morning and what it is actually made from. All those things actually do genuinely matter. Well, we could have continued this discussion for hours, because I'm just mind-boggled and fascinating about the work you're doing, and, you know, the knowledge that you have about all the things that I find really interesting. But we have to conclude at some point. Christoph Hayes, the founder of List.io, has talked a fair bit about regenerative farming and dealing with startup pressures and everything else. But I also think we have actually dissected so much more, including how the dollar you spend actually matters where you decide to spend it on. Thank you, everybody. And thank you so much, Christoph, for being with us today.
Thanks, Richard. Always a pleasure. Speak soon.
Speak soon.
Bye.
Do you remember that picture?
I remember that picture, not fondly, but I remember it very, very well.
Would you like to explain it? It's why we're here.
Yeah.
Well, it's the thing that triggered us to this path, right?
Yeah, it was certainly one of the guilty parties. And this is a picture from the IPCC number 6 report that was out 2 years ago. And it highlights with color coding, for those of you who are not colorblind, to green and brown scale, what will happen as the global temperature warms towards 3 degrees. And the areas that go brown are the ones where we are losing soil moisture, and the areas that are green are the ones retaining soil moisture, which is absolutely essential for growing our food going forward. And David has, with his artistic wit here, drawn 6 circles. And those 6 circles are, as you can see, all brown inside. But those 6 circles are also 6 of the 7 major food producing areas in the world. So with the globe warming to that level means our ability to grow food and feed the global population will more or less collapse because of the loss of water in our ground. The only area that remains green that is not circled is actually Eastern Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, Southern Russia. And that remains green. And that's a scary picture because we all know what's going on there.
So we've come to a close, and just to bring it all back into a lighter mood or a better mood is the fact that people like Christoph are working hard in order to guide us forward, and they're doing it because that is what they feel is the important thing for them.
Indeed.
So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you with us, and thank you for Morris for having been here and sharing us his song. And we hope you enjoyed our comedy. We hope you enjoyed Adam Wasserman and the insight he gives. And we hope you have enjoyed the whole program today, including the artwork with Prism and all the people who have been able to feature with us. It's for you, the antidote to COP28. And remember, redirect your spending to those you think are making the world better. Thank you.
See you all tomorrow. Good night.